They must have gotten word that she's not coming on time.
Yeah.
Notes.
Yeah, there's it.
All right, we ready? I call a meeting to order. Let's all stand as we are led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Jamie Cook. She's been associated with the General Counsel for the past 9 years, and she's moving away. And we're going to miss her, but I'd like to thank her for advice or representation over the years. Thank you, Jamie.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing as we are led in invocation by Chaplain Lenny LaGuardia.
You to shine your glory in this place. Heavenly Father, you said to do what is good is to do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly. Gracious Father, let your wisdom prevail in this time. Let all of us who serve be reminded of your ways. Father, bring peace to our city, to our leaders and their families, all who protect this great city. Bless their families and children, Lord. I pray, Father, for peace upon the children of our city and families. Have your way, Lord. I pray in my Savior's name. Amen.
Amen. You may be seated. Mayor.
Heather Hall, yes.
City Council presentation by the Mayor's Designee, Ms. Heather Hall.
Well, good morning, Commissioners, Chief Smith, officers. Thank you so much for letting me be with you today. I'm sorry I've missed you the last couple of months, but I'm glad to be back. I'm not sure if I'm actually back, but I'm at least here today. So I'm hopeful that I'll get to see you more often. And I just wanted to say, you know, the City Council, the Finance, Governance, and Public Safety Committee has been working diligently on finding ways to work through some of our areas of concern. One of those lately has been on our homeless situation, which I believe we came to a very positive resolution last week. Myself, I introduced a different ordinance along with my colleague Raina Park Shaw offered a resolution which we merged into one ordinance which would eliminate the pallet home project, but then fund at that same level of $2.5 million alternatives for people that are in the industry or in that homelessness space who do it well to be able to capture those dollars to continue to help serve the homeless populations in Kansas City. And so we feel like that's a more equitable way to help what we want to do, and I believe that also works with law enforcement, and it works with our homeless populations organizations to help make that a better situation. So we'll keep you posted on that. Also today I was going to, and I'm sorry he isn't here yet, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you what I was going to do. Major Scott Simons has been an incredible liaison for the last year and a half in Kansas City, well, 2 years maybe. Actually, it has been 2 years. And normally I don't recognize the city council liaison from the Kansas City Police Department because, not because they don't do a great job, just because we just kind of do it, and then every couple of years they change and they move on and do whatever else their next patrol choice is. But Major Simons, I believe, worked in an incredibly difficult time when the city council term started 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, when he started really working with the protest we had down at the plaza and being a liaison between the police department and the city and the community, and then also, of course, during a pandemic, which no one could have expected. And I just wanted to offer a proclamation from myself saying thank you for what he did and his service, because I don't know if you sign up to become a police officer to think you're going to hang out at City Hall all day and navigate the personalities of 12 city council people, their aides, the staff, the mayor, God bless him. It's a tough job. And for him to do that in an unprecedented way, in an unprecedented time, was extraordinary. And so I just wanted to stand before you all and thank him. Oh, this is perfect timing. And thank Major Scott Simons for his amazing work. Okay, we did not plan that, but that was amazing. Good job. So I'd like you to come up if you don't mind, Major Simons. I know you've got a million other things to do now that, you have a different job than you did for a year and a half. So we were just talking about the work you do. I said, I normally don't offer a proclamation to the city council liaison when they move on to their next job. However, we felt like you had done an extraordinary job with protests and unrest and in the pandemic and dealing with a lot of personalities at City Hall that surely had to equal, if not rival, those in which you see every day on the streets of Kansas City. So I wanted to just say thank you, and I was honored to work with you. Not only were you strong and determined, you were humble and kind in all the different things that you did for the service to our city. So I wanted to say thank you for that. So that's my report. We'll have more coming up in the next few weeks. I don't know how this will work out when I believe that the designee situation means that you're going to kind of have a revolving city council members coming in to meet with you. My hope is that we can maintain some consistency so that you know what you should expect from your report from us, reading and letting you know ordinances that are coming before us that are related to public safety, and those things are vitally important. So I'm sure that the mayor's office knows how to train the next person to come in and do that so that you have the effective information that you need to move forward with our relationship. So thank you so much. If you have anything, I'll stand for questions. Nope. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hall. We have guest presentations today. Our third-party administrator for workers' compensation from Lockton. Please come.
Good morning.
Morning.
I am Kathy Pulse. I'm the claim manager for Lockton. We are the broker for the police department. 6 months ago, we were asked to do a review of the claims management process for workers' compensation to make sure that the members were being treated in a fair and effective way. We did that review, and as a result of the review, we recommended use of a third-party administrator that would administer workers' compensation claims moving forward. We ran what we call a request for proposal and brought in 3 third-party administrators, and they presented to personnel from the city and from the police department, and the selection was made for Gallagher Bassett to be the third-party administrator for the police department. So, and Gallagher Bassett is somebody that we're familiar with. They do a very good job and really do take care of the injured workers, which I think is really important for the police department. So I think that's what's before you. Do you have any questions for me?
What's the change from last year?
Yeah, so currently it's been self-administered for a number of years. There have been personnel inside of Human Resources that have administered it. So this would be a change, and it would use a professional third-party administrator for claims.
Oh, I was looking over my notes from reading it. So, is there an evaluation period? I was reading the contract, and I didn't see an expiration date, neither did I see an evaluation period. Okay. So can we have something in there that gives us a yearly evaluation or yearly report?
Certainly. We're happy to do that.
All right. And I would like to see us add maybe a 2-year renewable review. So I don't know how we add that to it, or,
Commissioner?
Yes.
I'll just say that the contract is under an evergreen clause, so, and it can be terminated by either party, and I believe the timeline is 60 days. So if we don't like it, or if it's not working for us, it can be terminated by the department. And then also, as far as costs, they did do projections for us, which those projections would be $90,000 for the second year approximately, and then approximately the same for the third year.
sometimes when you have these open-end contracts, you know, they just kind of go into the abyss. So can we add a 2-year renewable review, even though it doesn't mean that we are going to get rid of it, but it means that at least it comes back up on the agenda to.
Yes, we can do that internally. We can.
Absolutely. Yes. And we do that
All right.
routinely. My department routinely does those to make sure that the service that you're getting is what it should be. That it's
And I
at the same
think
high
that,
standard.
my point is that should come to the board. So that at least the board sees it and it stays on the radar. So if we can add those clauses, I'm good with that.
And then, Commissioners, I would ask for your approval for this contract
With those changes,
with those changes, correct?
move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and second. All in favor by sign of aye.
Aye.
All opposed by no. Ayes have it. All right. All right. Yeah, if they'd given us a tab, I would have remembered that. And we are going to have some tab issues this meeting because of some changes, so if you can kind of make sure we know where to look, it would be appreciated. Annual audit presentation, Cochran Head and Vic Company, representative.
Good morning,
That's under
everyone.
what tab?
My name is Michael Keenan
That's in this
with the firm of Cochran Head Vic and Company, here to present the results of the April 30, 2021 audit. We're certainly pleased to be here. Mr. Ralph Johnson, who we do co-venture with this engagement, had prior commitments, is unable to be here. I have a PowerPoint presentation to help facilitate the presentation of the results of the audit. A little bit about Cochran Head Vic and Company. We've been serving Missouri and Kansas since 1975. We have a peer review, which is another outside independent auditing firm will come in and look at our quality control standards, and we have been awarded the highest rating as a result of that review. We're a member of the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, as well as other professional organizations, and we're licensed in Missouri, Kansas, and Nebraska. The scope of the audit, you should have been provided 3 reports. One, the larger copies of financial statements, also the single audit of your federal awards, and also, again, required communications and management letter. Again, we were engaged to perform an audit of the department's basic financial statements, as well as compliance of its federal awards, also known as the single audit for the year ended April 30, 2021. Our responsibilities as the auditors is to conduct our audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, governmental auditing standards, as well as the uniform guidance. And the uniform guidance dictates what we do as far as our audit of expenditures of federal awards. We're also responsible to report on internal controls over financial reporting and on compliance with laws and regulations. The Auditing Standards Board of the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, the AICPA, recommend that we communicate these matters to the governing board. Illegal acts, none came to our attention as a result of performing our audit procedures. significant changes in accounting policies. The department adopted Governmental Accounting Standards Board Statement Number 84, fiduciary activities, during the year. Basically, what that did, previously these funds, which the department manages in a fiduciary capacity, were called agency funds. Now the name has changed to custodial funds, and there's a little bit different presentation of how they are, but really didn't affect the financial results of the department, as these funds are custodial in nature and not available to be used by the department. Pleased to report we had no difficulties or disagreements with management, and we had full cooperation and access to the books and records. Really, a financial and compliant audit really addresses three basic questions. The first question, are the financial statements free of material misstatement? Again, we have issued an unmodified opinion that indeed the financial statements are free of material misstatement. That is commonly referred to as a clean opinion. That's the highest level of opinion that we as auditors can provide for external financial statements. Question two, are internal controls over financial reporting adequately designed and operating effectively? We did not identify any deficiencies in internal controls that we considered to be a material weakness. Again, had we done so, we would be required to report those to the governing board. Finally, did the department comply in all material respects with finance-related laws and regulations? And in our opinion, the department did comply in all material respects with finance-related laws and regulations. On our management letter, comments, the suggestions for best practices and possible improvements in internal controls noted during our audit. We had a comment regarding cybersecurity. While the department has policies and procedures in place, it's just a friendly reminder that this is becoming an ever-increasing problem with both private and public companies, and so we just recommend that you continue to monitor those situations so that you don't become a victim. And also, future accounting pronouncements. The Government Accounting Standards Board continues to issue new pronouncements. They're listed there. We don't believe any of these new pronouncements are going to have a significant impact on the department's financial statements. And Cochran Head Vick and Company, and again, Association of Welsh C. Johnson and Company certainly appreciate the opportunity to serve the department as the auditors. I want to thank Special Deputy Chief True, Major McCullum, Captain Bothman, Margaret Harmon, and Christine Ryder. Those were the folks that assisted us in the day-to-day inquiries and getting us the information. Very professional staff, I think, do a great job, and it was a pleasure to work with them. Now I'll try to entertain any questions that the board may have.
I have just a few, and I guess I'll start with saying they may be questions that I'm trying to understand from your report, and they might be better answered either by you or by the department. I'll ask to make sure I'm correct first. Is it accurate that in the, I'm looking at the risk management area of your report, pages 24 and 25 of the, I guess your lead book with financial statements. It appears we're roughly $26.1 million in the risk management areas. That includes workers' compensation, automobile liability, and then general professional liability. Is the professional liability segment that's $13.5 million, that's just any lawsuits filed against the department that don't relate to?
There's lawsuits filed against the department that management has discussed with legal and as well as the AGO, the state's AGO, and determine an estimate of the potential obligation for those, and that's the estimate that is used as of 4/30/2021.
Understood. And in that, so the $13.5 million, does that reflect a material change from previous years?
There was an increase from the prior year of a significant amount.
And what was that amount?
The difference between 7.6 and 13,
Oh,
so
okay.
approximately
So
a
it's a-
little under 6 million.
So there's about a $6.5 million increase from the previous year to this year in the general professional liability or
Right
lawsuits.
about a little
risk
less than
management.
6.
Pardon me?
5.9.
5.9, got it. All right, understood that. So you've answered my questions. I might ask why. Is it, well, maybe you can answer, or maybe they can. Is that just reflection of an increased volume of actions against us that we've elected to resolve, more judgments in court, or is there something else going on that your audit would have seen that would suggest for us some other management practices?
I think looking back, so you legal want to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, it's an estimate for whatever lawsuits are pending or claims that we may believe that are, that may come to the department. So, you know, I can't say whether or not it's more or less than before, but certainly the estimates have increased.
One bit of advice I might give, because we had the same issue at City Hall. We had several years of rising litigation costs and settlements, and we didn't really check it at an early enough point. And so then last year, some of you might have caught discussions on either fire department settlements. Actually, the water department has an area, was an area of concern too. Making sure we catch what those concerns are earlier help us greatly. In water, the concern was race and sex discrimination suits. I believe the fire department had that same concern. But when I see a $5.9 million increase over the previous year, when we all talk about budgets, it does give me some area of concern here. So I'll make that recommendation. Other question, to make sure I'm understanding something that gets us also in the cost realm. Is it typical with, and you audit other police departments and other agencies like that?
Yes, as a part of city governments.
Okay. So it appears we have a practice which is consistent with all sectors, that upon someone's retirement, they get back certain sick days that they've accrued per year, and that's kind of normal. But we also provide a significant percentage of sick days that have accrued over the years for someone who's terminated from the police department. Is that a typical practice? And I should give you a citation point. I think it's page 20.
The practices of compensated absences
Yes.
are based on individual government and what policies and procedures related to compensated absence they've adopted over the years. So policies may vary from entity to entity.
Okay. So the answer is it is fairly, it's not consistent department to department in terms of if compensated absences are provided for those who have been
Yeah, they
terminated.
typically have compensated absences, some form of sick pay, payout. Again, it might be varied based on years of service, amount of sick leave hours, and what conversion rate that may end up. But it's typical to have those policies as far as determining the amounts of that benefit. It's district to district or city to city.
Okay. So other recommendations, Spot, as we all think about where to find money, if we can find and hopefully reduce the additional $5.9 million in litigation liabilities that we are estimating here, we might also be able to find savings, assuming it's consistent with others, in the compensation days that are paid to those who have been terminated. Usually, I assume, well, when someone is terminated, i.e. fired, we're doing that for some reason because they've done something wrong, correct?
Yes, but the accumulation of that time is why they're in service. So the way our policy is set up, you acquire that time while you're in service. And then our policy dictates on separation what is paid and what's not. So that policy has always been at point of separation for whatever that is, retirement, termination, someone leaving, quitting, whatever you have at that point, we call it separation. And that is accumulated time that employees are given because they've earned it while they're in service.
Is that a negotiated item?
It is. It's in the contract.
I might encourage us at some point to consider, there is a difference between retirements and voluntary separations, resignations and retirements versus someone who's terminated. And the terminated person's receiving the same benefit as the resignation or retirement. I don't know if that's something we wish to continue, but I did want to highlight. And I guess from the auditor, there's not a clear answer in terms of what departments do. It just varies somewhat on voluntary versus compulsory separations and the compensated days. So I guess I'll just ask that we have some discussion on that as well. All right. That's all I have for that.
Is there an audit of the FOP included in your audit?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
The FOP, Fraternal Order of Police.
No, it's not included in our audit.
So is there an audit done, Chief, of what we pay into, or what the rank and file pays into the FOP?
We have nothing to do with that organizational structure.
Not according to the contract I'm reading. It comes under the Board of Police Commissioners.
Well, I think you're entering into an agreement with that entity, but we don't have any, we don't have any say on, it's a separate dealing like the Board of Police Commissioners in the city. It's a separate entity.
So I would suggest that, and this is a different subject, but as we get into that subject, I would suggest that if that organization comes under the Board of Police Commissioners, that we require an audit of the FOP as well.
Do we, if I may, I guess I may.
So that's my question. We'll address that at a later point.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, do we tend to have administration respond to points raised in the audit, or is it usually reported and this is kind of our last forum?
It has been, when they make the report, this is the thing. Now, we've come back and reported to you all of if you've had a question. Usually the auditor does not come back.
Okay, and that's fine. What I might ask is both, for our next meeting, a presentation both on the increase in litigation expenses for us, and then some report on our separation policies and just whether it's consistent with other departments and that sort of thing. That whole resignation and retirement folks being treated the same as those who were fired. Thank you.
Any other questions for the auditor? And I don't think we vote on the audit, we just receive it.
Just technically.
No, I think we,
Or do we accept
We
it?
don't approve it, we didn't do the numbers. He's right, it's just accepted.
So I don't think we need a motion. All right. There are no other questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Have a good morning.
Thank you.
Jackson County Prosecutor, Jim Peters Baker.
Morning.
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 Henry Chapman is with me, and he's going to set up a few slides. Can you hear me from here? Do I have to
No.
be right by the mic?
Yes, you need to
Maybe if I
use
pull
the
this
mic.
aside a little bit. So we're not waiting too long.
And I also have copies of our presentation, if you guys would like copies of them.
Yes, we would like copies. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I want to say thank you very much for allowing me to be here, for the invitation. It's really, really appreciated. So I just want you to know that first, that I'm really grateful. So I'm here humbly, if y'all can believe that. I am here very humbly. This is sometimes a difficult place for me to be in, but it's where we are. And so I want to present some information to you. With me is Henry Chapman with the Prosecutor's Office. I have some other folks in the audience, Dan Nelson, Mike Manser, Jennifer Dameron, and Dion Sankar, who is with us as well. If we have additional questions, we want to be able to answer any questions that you might have. So I made sure I brought as full a team as I could so that we could do that. But let me go ahead and get started. I wanted to first say, Henry, if you'd flip to that first slide, thank you. We do have lots of collaboration that we do with each other right now. So I just wanted you to see some of those things that we do together right now, that we have done, and that we will continue to do. One of the things that I think is very important is that I have a prosecutor that goes to the scene of every homicide that occurs. That's not just in Kansas City, that's where the vast majority of homicides occur, but I do that throughout Jackson County. So that's my commitment to the public that I represent and the ability to get the best possible case I can get so I can prosecute that homicide. But you can go through that list as to the amount of collaboration that we do together. And I'm sure these were just kind of a couple of quick items that I came up with. I'm sure there are many others, that I didn't think to put on a slide, but these were things that I thought were notable and important. Not everything that we bring you do you disagree with. I want you to see that, on data collaboration, we're doing a lot in that regard as well to help advise the police department how we might be able to get stronger cases, to get them more quickly. And I think there's a lot of agreement on that front. So some things make the news and some don't. But that's one of those areas where my team represented to your team how I thought we could do a better job. And there's a lot of interest in that regard. So I just wanted that to be said as well. My comments today in this presentation that we really worked hard to put together over time. This is not something we put together in moments. We've been working on this for many, many, many months. In fact, probably now about a year. So the recommendations that were given to me by my office and that we worked through on this new public safety policy is something that I also campaigned on. Because it happened to fall during a time when I was up for re-election. I was re-elected, but you'll note that many, many, many times I mentioned this to the public of which I was asking for their vote, that this is a place I expected to go, the data was leading me to this place, and that I expected that there would be changes here. And so here we are, just to that change moment. So this, you can go ahead and flip ahead. I wanted to talk specifically about drug cases because of the pandemic, I thought it was very important that I look at what cases could I look at to do something different with. So we really start digging in due to the pandemic. My courtrooms were closed due to jury trials, though we kept going in, our courts never really closed, but when the jury system cut off for us, that created a backlog for me. So I was planning ahead for backlog. Backlog, though, led to other types of discussions. What else can we do here about drugs? How effective are we? Are we good at this? Are we getting to the heart of what we're here to do? And I was really surprised to see the number of cases that were coming, that are drug cases. This is the biggest case that I get the biggest number of cases I get from KCPD is drug cases. So this slide is, a little bit self-explanatory. It says what I just said earlier. It is by far the largest category. As you can see, 2020 is way down, and that's pandemic related. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, but you say it's the largest, but and I must be missing something, because the drug cases, like for 2020, 577, and the others are 1615. So it looks like drug is smaller than the others. What am I missing?
No, the first bar that you see are the drug cases that were sent to us.
Yes. And you said we send you more than anything else. And what's under that is 1615. What's that from?
1615? I'm lost.
Go back a slide.
Oh, gotcha.
Oh, can I jump in? Sure.
Please, Henry.
So I'd be happy to answer that. So this blue bar here are the lead charge drug cases that we received from the Kansas City Police Department. This kind of darker blue bar are all the remainder of every other case that wasn't a lead charge drug case that the Kansas City Police Department sent us. So for 2019, for example, the Kansas City Police Department sent us around 1,400 drug cases and 2,500 other cases. Does that make more sense?
What makes more sense, but I don't know what the others are. Is it just like
And
Flip to the
property
next slide.
crimes, just
yeah,
everything?
so we'll go to the next slide. And there's also a reason why the 2020 numbers are low. Like Gene was saying, part of that is pandemic related. The other part of that is our data scope. So this only goes until September 1st, 2020. Because we were working on this starting kind of in the middle of the pandemic last year, and this is the same slide. To be fair, the drug referrals have dropped, specifically from the Narcotics and Vice Division, but possession cases have not dropped nearly as much. And so what this graph is showing is these kind of dark blue bars are those lead charge drug cases that we were talking about before. And then all these other categories are all the other categories that we get from the police department. So assault, weapons, robbery.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, if you'll flip ahead. And Henry's here. I thought it was best for, the one that did the data work, got challenged quite a bit, by the way, about the data work, because I've been in law enforcement over 20 years. I've always been taught drugs equal violence. That's it. And that did not result in this data pull. It just didn't. Now, this is probably close to 10,000 cases that we pulled for this type of analysis. So it's not a small number. It was a large data set. We didn't come in with an objective about we want the data to show X. We just didn't. And racial disparity data was the last piece that I folded in. And it was important. It should be important for all of us, right, to know we're post-Ferguson. We are maybe post-George Floyd. These are questions that we should all be asking ourselves. So it's a question that I asked. And I was pretty disturbed with the racial disparities. But it does make sense because enforcement policies really are in communities that are most harmed, most vulnerable, or where most violent crime occurs. But going after violent crime by going after low-level offenses has an impact, and perhaps not the one that we're actually after. Perhaps it's one that's actually harmful. So one of the things I wanted to just set up for this discussion is that we really guard against, kind of call our better angels, to look at how not all communities are the same, not all neighborhoods are the same, and that we should not look at the most prized neighborhood. Maybe I could use my own. I live in Waldo. I think Waldo's a pretty awesome community. But we don't have the same kinds of issues that other neighborhoods within Kansas City have. And my focus has really been on those neighborhoods because that's what the data has shown me to look at as well. That geography is also important. And communities that have been long-standing vulnerable communities. These are the people that I'm really looking at, speaking to, and looking to find ways to do a better job representing and gaining their trust, gaining their legitimacy by policies that actually work for them and that are actually fair, So I don't want to belabor some of these. You can look at these slides yourself about what our data showed regarding racial disparities. The largest is this slide that's up now, and that's the disparities in buy-bust cases. Again, I didn't seek the outcome. I let the data lead me.
And Prosecutor, could you describe a buy-bust case for us?
I can. That is where someone is identified as someone police maybe want to see if they can do an undercover drug deal with, to see whether or not the person entertains them, and then it comes to my office as a delivery case or sale, so it's a higher level charge, it's the B felony. So this helps explain why this practice exists. The drug cases, buy-box cases, this shows you where the vast majority of them are. The geography, though, also overlays where most of the violence occurs. So the idea about why we do this kind of policing, why this kind of prosecution has happened, was related to a notion that of saturation patrols, a broken windows theory, that if we enforce heavily and hard in areas where there's high crime, we can beat out the crime. But what we've learned across the whole country, not just here, but across the country, is that type of practice actually harms. It actually causes harm because it creates a greater divide, a greater distrust, a greater delegitimizing effect occurs within the system. Because then when you go to the same folks and you ask them, hey, did you see something that homicide occurred on your block? You were home at the time. Did you hear anything? Did you see anything? Did you see a car go by? You don't have people that will help. All right, I'm going to let Henry jump in on this because he's smarter than me.
I wouldn't go that far. Absolutely, though. So one of the central questions in our analysis was how do we connect drugs to violence? Because the narrative in law enforcement for as long as I've been working there and decades before me was that if you go after the drugs, you'll have a great impact on reducing violence in communities. And what we found was pretty startling. So what we're looking at here in computer science terms is a graph. It's a network graph. Each one of these green dots is one of our randomly sampled drug defendants from 2019. So we sampled 20% of all of our lead charge drug defendants that we received in 2019 from the Kansas City Police Department. And so that was around 276 total people, right? So it's a fairly sizable sample. In terms of statistics, 20% is well more than you need for a random sample. The next thing we did was we looked at all of those Jackson County cases that each of those 276 people had. With those cases, we wanted to go far back enough to get a good picture, but not too far back such that we were looking at like cases from the 70s, right? So we went back to 2015. The next thing we did was we wanted to classify whether those cases were violent or nonviolent. And we wanted to take as expansive a definition of violence as we possibly could here. So in order to expand that definition of violence, we not only looked at what you consider a standard violent case, like a homicide or a rape or a sexual assault, but we also looked at all weapons cases. So if a case involved weapons, it counted as violent. And we, after discussions with some of our violent crimes prosecutors, we also counted endangerment cases too. So that's
If I could just jump in there. Regarding guns, guns are almost Americana. Now, so to add, if you're a gun possessor, makes you violent, it might be controversial to some, by the way. But I wanted to have as expansive a definition as I could, although, a lot of people carry guns legally. That's just the case of it. Now, you add any kind of drugs in your pocket and you're carrying the gun. It is illegal, then it becomes illegal, but this is the state of where we are. Plus, we're in this sort of odd place now with marijuana. It's not really odd if you look at the rest of the country because we're one of probably 36 states now that have some form of legalization of marijuana. So that has to be taken into account, at least from a legal perspective, which is what my job is in this discussion.
all right. So each one of those
Just a second. So are you saying that if someone has marijuana and a gun, that's illegal?
Potentially. Missouri now has legalized medical marijuana. We're still trying to figure that out, how that works in Missouri. But yes,
thank you.
We should presume that.
Yeah, so each one of these green dots is one of those randomly sampled 276 drug defendants. Each one of those blue dots is a nonviolent case that those drug defendants were associated with from 2015 to the present in Jackson County. So blue dots are nonviolent cases, red dots are violent cases. What you notice from this graph is that there aren't that many red dots. In fact, only 13.78% of all the world of cases that our random sample of defendants were associated with were violent and met our pretty expansive criteria that we just developed for violence. And in fact, only 69 out of those 276 defendants had a violent case, which is only 25% of those defendants. So in the world of all the drug defendants that we got from Kansas City, only 25% of them we could have established as having a prior received, filed, or disclosed case in Jackson County.
Now let me take the data guy into a regular person. This shocked me, and it shocked everyone in my office. And the reaction by people in my office, including me, was, who's this data guy? He got that wrong. That can't be right. So we kept making him go back and go back and go back, and then it is what it is. At some point, you got to be able to trust data, especially when you've gone back through it and mined it. Now, what a lot of us did, including myself, is I would say, yeah, but you know what? I remember that one homicide that occurred, in this part of town, and it was a marijuana rip, and that resulted in 2 people were shot. So yes, that it does also happen. So this is not to say drugs do not equal violence. It's simply telling you the data tells us it is not true 100% of the time.
And so the next logical question that I had was, after seeing that drug defendants
Can I just
generally...
ask, and I just want to make sure I'm getting you as well as I can. Because I don't know if you watch James Bond characters, but you remind me of the character Q. You've been told. It's on point. So I'm supposed to see in this the dearth of red suggests to me that the long-standing supposition that exists that drug defendants is getting your future murderer or your last murderer off the street perhaps isn't shown from at least the data in Jackson County of late. And that is based on this 5-year capture of information that you have. Okay. And then do you track, or maybe this is your next question, what people do after the drug arrest? So guy or gal who's caught with a certain amount of narcotic, another supposition I've heard through my life is that's indicia of later criminality or potential to engage in violent activity. Do we have data on that?
We do show you prosecutor outcomes because they were pretty bad. My outcomes on all these cases that we prosecuted were pretty awful, which led me to something I did already know, because I've tried drug cases personally for a number of years. I did that kind of work for the office, and it has gotten increasingly harder and harder and harder. In fact, juries just flat out acquit. When we bring them drug cases, often, there's a hostility in the courtroom for us bringing the case. The law is still the law, but we also match some of our findings within the prosecutor's office, our own findings, with what are our juries telling us? What are our judges telling us? And how are we faring on these? How many people are we getting to go to drug court? Is there another way? So we did that work in a variety of different ways, Mayor, but I will say, some of you may have other information that you would like us, to rather, to go back and hone or look at, and we are really open to doing that. We worked hard at putting this together, so we're not just giving you something slapdash. However, we know that there could be imperfections, and you may look at it differently. So we did ask a variety of police commanders as well to look at this and help us and help inform us. What are we missing? Same thing we did with community.
Excuse me. You've mentioned Jackson County, which obviously you're the Jackson County prosecutor, but Are these cases that you're talking about all cases that are Kansas City, Missouri Police Department cases?
Yes, these are all Kansas City, Missouri Police Department cases. Also,
Within Jackson County.
Within Jackson County, yes. We don't have any data north of the river, and that's a really important intellectual caveat that we have to mention. We're only looking at our data sets here, because that's what we have access to. We're not looking at federal data sets, and we're not looking at data sets from other jurisdictions around the country. To be fair, though, based on our research that we've done into violence, we find violence to be incredibly localized, right? So when we're looking at homicides and non-fatal shootings specifically, we found that over 60% or 65% of homicides and non-fatal shootings happen within a mile or 2 miles of the defendant and suspect's address. So violence in Kansas City is very localized, so that's why we feel comfortable making these types of assertions, even though we're limited by the data that we have access to.
Okay, so you're limited because there are other law enforcement in Jackson County that are giving you cases, and there are other counties in Kansas City that our officers go to.
Correct. So Clay County, Platte County, that's not that we don't care about them, but we don't have access to their data, and we did not do a big data pull for them. The U.S. Attorney's Office is the same, but we would love to have others' data so that we could kind of grow out a little bit broader, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
What about Independence and Raytown?
So we looked at them. We have other slides, not in this presentation for brevity, but the vast majority of narcotics cases come from the Kansas City Police Department. Independence is obviously number 2, and then the varyingly amounts of other Jackson County agencies give us cases. To be fair, the vast majority of proactive narcotics investigations come from the Kansas City Police Department. Other departments just don't have the resources to have dedicated narcotics squads.
And we're happy to provide that to you if we just wanted to. Was a Kansas City centric presentation, but I do have a slide on that so you can see the number of cases that come into my office and where they come from, all the way down to Buckner and Sibley, so that you could take a look at that if you'd like. I'm happy to send it.
But to Mr. Kinner's question, is your response a suggestion that per capita, if we were to run the numbers, Independence will refer to you fewer drug cases than Kansas City's police department or Raytown or Grandview? That's
By a lot fewer. Not a little fewer, a lot fewer.
So after looking at drug defendants as a whole, our next logical question was, okay, maybe drug defendants aren't that violent, at least by our data. What about drug dealers? And the answer was a little more violent, but not nearly as more violent as I thought they would be. So doing that same analysis, looking at all drug delivery defendants, so all buy-bust defendants that we received from the Kansas City Police Department in 2019. We're not dealing with a random sample here. We can look at all 2019 drug delivery defendants. We found that only 27% of those cases had a violent or weapons case, and only 36% of those sampled drug delivery defendants had a violent or weapons case within the last 5 years, so 2015 to 2020. So it seems that maybe our long-held beliefs about drugs and violence aren't what we originally thought they were.
Okay, so why? Why are we doing this? Just to provide you some more consternation? No. I really wanted to do a better job for the people that I represent, and that is everybody within Jackson County. And I very much want the system that I have when I use prosecution resources, that they're fair, that it's fair. I want to be fair. And when we are cramming in a small geographic area, a lot of drug cases, which, by the way, if you got a single pill in your pocket without a prescription, that's a felony, state-level felony. That's what it is. So what is the impact of all of those state-level felonies that occurred, in one small geographic compact place? That's a whole nother discussion, but I just push pin it because it is important to think about. But are we doing this fairly? Is enforcement happening fairly? And is prosecution, my job, is prosecution happening fairly? So that a young man walking down the street where a sidewalk is provided in my neighborhood, does he get pulled over and does his pockets get turned out? And does he get that same felony for having something in his pocket as well? So where you look for drugs tends to be where you find them. We know that my office, is responsible for grand delays in getting these cases charged and getting them into the criminal justice system. So that, I have to share that burden with police as well, because these cases are not coming quickly. Even though we really worked on a TrueNarc system so they could come much more quickly into the system, it did cut off some time, but it's still, we are really, really delayed when these cases get filed, at least probably 4 months before they get into the system. And right there, that evidence alone tells judges, well, you really didn't think this guy was very violent because it took you 4 months to get him here. And it's hard to argue that point, right? So this cost us a lot of money. Now, a lot of this is sort of baked into the system, so I'm not saying that, we can quit doing this and we'll just, all net a whole bunch of money in our budgets. I am still working on, but when I bring you something, I want it to be something that I trust, something that I have researched, something that I believe is credible based on evidence and data. And I don't have that number yet for Jackson County because I'm not yet comfortable with how to pull out the cost for a Jackson County case. But what we think is nationally, it's $146,000 per drug possession case. And that's from law enforcement all the way through the prosecution system and through the criminal justice system at the very end. So we know that there is a cost to this, and we presume Jackson County is not more efficient probably than that. So that's probably in the ballpark, but that's a national statistic, not local. So I never just want to bring you the problem and don't bring any solution. I do have a solution. Now, I am not bound by what y'all do. I want to say that. I'm not bound by what you do. I am my own independent, I run my own independent office. I stand, in a different place. So I came up with a policy that I think also informed by some people within the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department, not just community, not just treatment providers, but we went to all of our partners to try and come up with what can we do different? How can we do this different? And in fact, how could we actually build better credibility with the communities that we really need, those most vulnerable communities? What can I do for them to let them know you can expect us to be fair? You can expect us to look at data and own that data. When the data tells us we're not being fair, you can trust that we're going to look that straight in the face. We're not going to hide from it, and we're going to come up with policies to be fair. So this is what we want. We want drug cases. And frankly, I don't care if someone's selling Tic Tacs illegally out of the can one by one. Bring me that case if you can show me there's a connection to violence. I want people who are violent. They belong in my system. But that can't be everybody. We have to have a documented connection or nexus to violence. That, I thought, was not quite enough. I needed to give a little bit more room. Because as we all know, when a drug dealer sets up on your block, they really destroy the sanctity of the block. So I wanted to make sure we had a place for those folks within the criminal justice system. So that is the sort of high community concern that is paired with someone who deals drugs or is just an addict and is causing so much trouble within a community. We would like to have that case as well. So another few options that we have is that we have used these before, these neighborhood accountability boards. We are going directly to the community with treatment. This community is different. Jackson County is different from every other community that this police department touches. And the reason for that is because we have a 1/4-cent sales tax called Combat. And Combat provides treatment directly to the community. It also funds my drug court, which we stand behind drug court, and will continue to support drug court. But we're going to probably start shifting the name from drug court, by the way, to treatment court or problem-solving court, because that is sort of the new innovation in the way we should look at this. So Combat is already a partner with us. I have the privilege also and the opportunity, I guess, to oversee that tax. but we have always pushed millions of dollars out into the community for drug treatment. And we're going to continue to do that and figure out how we can better use combat to get treatment to people more directly without the felony conviction or without putting you through drug court. Those are a few things that we wanted you to know. I know that I've probably gone over on time. I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to ask me any more questions that you'd like. I'm here to answer all of them. But I do want you to know that drug court was not firmly embraced when that prosecutor brought the concept of drug court over 30 years ago. Sorry, by this department. It was not embraced. It was deemed foolish. It was coddling criminals. What do you want to do? You want to hug these drug dealers? You want to hug the drug addiction out of them? But now, 30 years later, every county in the state of Missouri has a drug court. It's normalized. I don't believe that those people who put combat in place thought the innovation would end with that drug court concept 32 years ago. I think they expected that we'd keep learning and growing and be informed by data and be informed by how to do this better. So that's why I'm here, happy to take any questions you have.
I'll hop in if, is that all right? Okay. I got to ask questions or else I'm not doing my job in full level of engagement. I will note first, and this is just the respect category, you have been either the prosecutor or an assistant prosecutor for in excess of 20 years, correct?
Yes.
All right. And I guess the first question I might ask in a series is to go back on the action you want the department to take. Because I know there is the idea, and it's cited in the letter, and I'll refer back to the letter from your brother prosecutors in other parts of Kansas City, from Clay and Platte County, that notes there is prosecutorial discretion. So theoretically, you have the opportunity
There's
to...
police officer discretion too, by the way. So police determine where they're going to enforce. I don't. So that's discretion as well. And all of us use discretion. As a prosecutor, I use discretion, but I really am trying simply to tell you what it is and why I informed it the way I did, and challenge me. Tell me where it's wrong, and maybe I can go back to the table by taking your ideas into consideration and making it even better.
So what you're looking for is upfront kind of, I guess it would be command staff, well, board to command staff decisions on what enforcement priorities should be that will be more likely to get convictions in Jackson County Circuit Court, or alternatively are more likely to address problem people in the system?
I would even go a step further than that, Mr. Mayor, and that is, I was accused of using my feelings to make policy. You know, when you're me, that makes me mad, because I didn't do that. I have a lot of feelings, and this data is, in fact, my original feelings were, this can't be right. It's not what I was taught. This can't be right. So what I will tell you is that we need to look at all policies as they are impacted on certain neighborhoods, certain communities. Again, this probably doesn't include my area of Waldo, right? Because we really don't have that many problems, and now I'm going to get a bunch of angry mail. But there are certain neighborhoods that are really racked by crime, violence, and too often we can't meet the demand of getting justice for them because it's not solved. Same time, we're going in with enforcement policy in those neighborhoods where they're literally pulled over, ticketed for walking in the street where a sidewalk is provided. I use that one a lot because my street is that street. It's a beautiful sidewalk, but everybody walks in the street. It's a thing. And nobody ever gets stopped, ever. In fact, there'd be outrage if you guys tried to change that now. So my point is, we should all look at, okay, if we enacted this policy at one point in time, is it working? And if we're we're going after vulnerable communities in this way, does it work? Or does it actually have an opposite effect of harming us when it really matters? And that is when the bullets go flying. And do we have available witnesses? Do we have people who trust us because they think we're fair? And if we're fair, they're going to come talk to us. It's just, to me, it's that simple. And so when other departments around the country have changed their policies, I don't think they were accused of being led by their feelings. Like Milwaukee's police department and Tampa Bay's police department. I could give you a list of others. But those are two that I know that as collaborative groups, we went together to see those two departments.
What do you say to, and this was also raised in a letter from the Northland County's prosecutors, about inconsistency in enforcement, and not just inconsistency as to one department operating in 4 counties, but I guess go with that first, and then I'll have a follow-up hypo.
You know, we've always had different policies, so that's not new. I'll give you another one. Years ago, we quit doing criminal non-support. It just didn't make any sense because we were giving, the non-custodial parent a felony conviction for not paying their child support and then telling them, go get a job and pay that child support. It just didn't make sense. So we pulled all those back. By the way, at one point in time, that was well over 1,000 cases too. And so we pulled that back. I don't know what they do in other counties, but I don't presume that the civil contempt process is used as often as I use it. That's a difference in policy. Another difference in policy is driving while your license is suspended or revoked. There had been this progression. You get so many of those, and then you get a felony up in state court when you keep doing it. I pulled back on that. Also, with the call from one of my brothers up north saying, "Oh, don't do that. What are you doing? You're being crazy." But I pulled before I pulled the policy back, I looked at, well, how effective is my office at doing these prosecutions? Awful. We were terrible at it. We were getting terrible outcomes. So the point was, why are we doing this? Frankly, if city court can do it better, why don't they keep it? And that's a difference in policy as well. I'm sure there are others.
On another inconsistency point, I grew up in this city in Jackson County. Like many here, I lived in a majority black neighborhood, but I went to high school in a majority white neighborhood, Verona Hills. And as I look at kind of the documented community concern, I could see a situation where, let's say, the people of Verona Hills say, we don't have a lot of criminal activity, but we know the kids are smoking marijuana or doing drugs in X or Y park. And then they say they're usually black kids that are coming to do whatever there. And so we have, in a way, right, by addressing, this is hypothetical, right? Do we create some concern where there will be enforcement only where neighborhoods have concern, which may be disproportionately ones that are white or anything of that sort, and might target potentially black defendants or suspects in more situations that way? So how do we, I think some might say that, well, if we have a system where we just do the same for everybody, no matter where they are, then that's one fair way. Whereas if you go with this discretion as to each officer, which becomes more difficult, maybe they say, well, in South Zone, a slightly more suburban area is concerned about these sorts of issues, so we answer those calls, whereas in Center Zone, they don't. How do we address that sort of concern?
One of the things we could do in the scenario that you set up, right, is we're going to evaluate those community concerns. Prosecutors are actually going to go out and talk to the neighborhood leaders who have concerns. So we're not leaving all this at the feet of police, and we're going to confirm that what the problem is and how can we potentially solve it. Another difference is in Jackson County we use at times these neighborhood accountability boards, and that may be one of those times where I could bring in a neighborhood accountability board to help me address a particular problem. I would also say in a case like that, I would have police at the table as well saying, help us solve this. How can we get there? Maybe prosecution's the answer. By the way, I've been doing this for a long time. I believe in my system. We are not perfect. We are not perfect. And I'm now looking at data seeing we're really not perfect. However, I believe prosecution can work. I want to use my resources when it really works rather than just what our gut feelings tell us it will work.
I may have some more, but that's good for now. Thank you.
Steve?
You mentioned drug court, and in your letter to us, you told us what you've told us today, that we take too long to get defendants to treatment. My concern is, under your proposal, those defendants would not be charged and would not be eligible for drug court, so they would not get any treatment. What's this idea about that you have that they would get treatment when the officer hasn't brought that name to your attention?
So we do need to know who those names are. So I did work about 3 years ago trying to come up with a combat-funded program where combat would fund someone, a treatment specialist, to come in at arrest and take that person and see if they met certain metrics, take them directly to treatment. The police department was not, at that time, not wanting to do that kind of effort with us, so we moved on.
Just a second, so you think there are enough people that combat can hire to go to every arrest?
No. What I'm telling you is that combat already, right now, puts millions of dollars at community level for treatment for people. So you are correct in saying, all right, this is a pretty big change. So how are we going to direct people to treatment? I think that we have some work ahead of us to try and figure out how to pivot combat-related resources, that drug treatment-related resource, and get it out much more quickly than we do now. So we're working on that right now in the office, where we're working with some of our treatment providers that are funded through combat to see how they can engage at arrest level, and how quick, if that case is coming to me, how quick we can get it to a treatment provider to get them treatment, if treatment is needed.
Okay, so you could do that right now if you get the money in the plan. Our officers arrest them. They tell you what they've done, you know, heroin, whatever, and give you the name and the contact information, and you can, because your prosecutors have absolute discretion, you can say, we're not going to prosecute this person. We're going to get him into treatment, right?
Correct.
Okay. So we could continue to arrest them and give them to you, and you can then divert wherever you think is best.
That's true. I would ask that you looked at where you are arresting.
Okay.
And I would ask you to just look at racial disparity numbers, look at geography, and think about whether or not that also has an undue burden when we come to the most important issue to me, violence. Someone's shot. And are we going to meet that need? Because do we have community that trust us to help? So I'm asking for just an overall view of fairness. I'm not telling you what the fairness is. I'm asking you just to look at that and think about it based on these very vulnerable communities that are just most often harmed. And it's mostly where people of color live. It's where there are higher concentrations of poverty.
And it's where we get most of our calls for service.
True enough.
So when we're called and they say these people are dealing drugs, right, and they want us to arrest them, we do. And I think the community wants us to.
And that is one type of case that you talked about. What I ask you to do very humbly and respectfully is don't cloak everybody in that one case that you brought up. That there's a lot of different varieties here. And I'm not saying that criminal prosecution on drug cases won't happen. I'm telling you, we're going to keep some. We're going to keep ones where you fall into one of these two categories.
But you understand that the officers can't make those choices when they're arresting. That's something you're going to have to do when you get the case.
Yes, but we have also detectives, lots of detectives that do this type of work as well to look at drug defendants, because you don't bring me every drug case that you get too, by the way. I don't get them all, and that's a discretion as to whether or not the case is brought to me or not.
Because some of them go to Platte County and some of them go to Cass County. And
well, that's true, but that's not what I'm referring to. I'm referring to the discretion that's sometimes used, that sometimes people work their cases off in other ways.
Okay, okay. You've met with the other counties' prosecutors, right?
On what particular
on this issue?
Yeah, we have tried to do that. We have asked for meetings where we can present all of our data to them. I don't know how important that might be for them, because it's simply not their community. Where I'd like to spend the majority of my time, and anybody who's listening today, if you'd like us to come out and do a presentation to your neighborhood, we would like to do that. But that is really we'd like to be in communities in Jackson County where it makes some sense.
But we can't have, you can tell me how you think this would work. How can we give our officers direction to do certain things in Jackson County that they don't do in the other 3 counties? If that isn't discrimination, I'm concerned that it is.
You do it right now with enforcement practices.
All right. Does your data show that?
Your data should show that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I see our goal as a board is that we want to partner with Prosecutor, Combat, Aim for Peace, whoever can help us reduce crime and violence and violent people. And what I took a real close look at is the by-bus cases. And I've always said, if a certain area is over-policed, then you're going to find what you're looking for. So I want to make sure that every area is policed percentile-wise according to, how that area should be policed, so that one area is not focused on the microscope and the other area is not. And that's kind of what I hear you saying.
It's just fairness.
Right.
Fairness. We applied fairness. Is this fair? And maybe we had good intentions for certain practices in the past, but now looking at it, in our current era, does that still make sense? Did it harm us in some way? And could we actually be doing more harm when we think we're doing something good? That's what I'm asking you simply to think about. I'm not telling you, what to do. Just, I guess I am. I'm telling you to think about certain things.
Have you talked to the Missouri Attorney General about this?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
No.
And
So
we
you
are.
don't, you don't have, you
I'm
don't have
sure
a legal,
willing.
pardon me.
I'm certainly willing to talk to the Missouri Attorney General about this, but this would be outside of the Missouri Attorney General's province.
Well, doesn't the Missouri Attorney General's office give legal opinions on things like this, where you're saying, in essence, don't enforce certain laws?
I'm not saying that, okay? My policy most specifically says, bring me drug cases where there is a nexus to violence or a high community concern. That means there is an enforcement practice that must still exist. I'm saying my office, all right, and I don't seek the Attorney General's permission. I also don't seek his rancor, okay? So I want to say that. I don't seek it. Please don't sue me today. But I don't seek his permission. I am duly elected to represent Jackson County, and my professional opinion is this practice has caused us harm. It has caused us harm in the most important way it could, that it keeps us further from a community to trust us when we really need them to trust us. And I also want to just say, and I mean this, I mean it, I want this police department to be strong, and I want it to be good, and I want it to be trusted, and not just me, I want the community to view it in all those ways. I want a relationship that I once had with this department where I could call the police chief and say, we have a problem regarding shooting into motor vehicles, and I'd like to come over and talk to you about it. And he allowed me to come and talk to him about it, and there was a retraining. And you know what? We have not had that incident occur because he allowed me to have a dialogue. And he addressed my concerns in a way that was deemed to help. I still am that same person. I've not changed. I want very, very much to be on the same page here. I want very, very, very much to find a way to address violence better, more fairly. more efficiently so that we all get what we're after. We all agree on this. We all want violence reduced.
Absolutely.
So if we all agree, and I agree that you agree with me on that, and I trust everyone in this room wants that, then there should be, that's a base block for us to stand on in order to come to a next step of how potentially we could get there.
I'm trying to understand how to explain to the officers, if this policy is in place, how they're supposed to act in the different counties where they work. For instance, you've mentioned marijuana a lot. Do you think that we should prosecute fentanyl or heroin?
Absolutely. Absolutely, we should prosecute fentanyl.
Okay.
Mayor is going to have the last question. We really are way over time.
You're right.
On this presentation.
I'll be really quick. I would never pretend to speak for the prosecutor, but I imagine you would say it'd be a good world if it just so happened that the other counties followed your viewpoint on these as well, right? So I think in some ways you're
I'm just hoping not to get sued today, that's all.
It's day to day for all of us. A few things I might say that I would find to be more helpful information going forward and in future presentations. You noted that you have trouble getting a jury conviction in Jackson County.
Getting a jury seated. Yeah, if I can get a jury, they're probably going to acquit, but getting a jury seated on drugs. We've had documented cases where we couldn't seat a jury.
Okay. So whatever more information you can provide there, I think is helpful for us. I do think either the commentary that we had at the very beginning where you talked about referrals per capita from Independence, Grandview, Lee Summit, the rest of Jackson County, which in many ways has similarities to our jurisdictions in the Northland and others, would be interesting for us to know too, to see what is the comparison. I'd frankly be kind of intrigued by what, and I have no idea what they'll say, but what those other departments kind of think about a procedural change too, because this will be an office policy for all of Jackson County, right?
Yes, however, I have caveats for that policy throughout that make sense for particular jurisdictions. And when you see that chart of what drug cases are coming to me and how they're coming, you'll understand what I'm saying. That buy-bust operations are really sort of a Kansas City-centric thing to do. They're not done other places. So I'll just say that.
All right, I'll stop there. Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Commissioner?
Yes.
We've had Dr. Dred Scott. He's coming to make a presentation, and I think we're going to have a lengthy discussion. He's in the audience. Could we move him up on the agenda so he doesn't have to stay for?
Well, I don't have a problem with that. So you want to move him up now?
If we
instead
could.
of the reports?
Please.
All right. Youth and Police Initiative. I'm going to change the agenda and call for Dr. Dred Scott with the Boys and Girls Club.
All right, good morning, everyone. It's okay, I'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for giving me a little bit of your time today. I understand that You have an action-packed agenda and lots of important things to discuss. I'm here to discuss an initiative that's very important to me and close to my heart, and also one that I believe is making a real difference across the Kansas City community. So it's my honor to be here with you on this morning to talk about the Youth Police Initiative, or what we fondly refer to as YPI. My name is Dred Scott. I'm the president and CEO of Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Kansas City. Just so that you're a little bit more familiar with who I am, I'll just give you a brief introduction of myself. So I'm a Kansas City native, born and raised right here in Kansas City. Graduated from Kansas City Public Schools and have been an educator for over 20 years and been with the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Kansas City now for 3 years in the role as president and CEO. I'm proud of the work that we're doing. Want to acknowledge Chief Rick Smith, who I know is in the room today, who has been a great partner in this initiative that you're going to hear about on today. Also want to acknowledge the Board of Police Commissioners, who I know have at least heard of this initiative and are supportive of the difference that we're trying to make within the community. So let me tell you a little bit about the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Kansas City, just to level set a bit. I would be remiss as president and CEO if I didn't take a little bit of time to talk about the organization. So number one is our organization has been a part of the Kansas City community for over 100 years. A lot of times when I share that fact, people are surprised by that. But we've been a vital part of youth development and work in the community for now nearly 105 years. We have 12 program locations across the Kansas City Metro that spans both sides of the state line, both in Missouri and in Kansas. And specific to this initiative and really the group that's here in the room, we have 3 locations in Kansas City proper and have plans this coming school year to expand to 2 additional locations. The Youth Police Initiative that I'll talk about today is being conducted. Cohorts are being facilitated in 2 locations here in Kansas City. It started the pilot year at our J&D Wagner unit that's located on 24th and Elmwood on the east side of Kansas City. And then we expanded that last year so that we had cohorts at our Thornberry unit on 43rd and Cleveland. So both of those clubs are located in areas of the community that need us most. That's the way we refer to it as. When we look at the folks that are living in those communities, we see tremendous potential, especially in the young people. And what we're trying to do is introduce them to their futures, irregardless of where they live and the challenges that they may face. So, you know, the statistics that you all were hearing about just before my presentation, we're very keenly aware of the challenges in those communities, and that's why we're there, in order to have an impact and invest early, be proactive in helping our young people avoid some of the issues that you all spend time discussing today. We work with over 1,200 youth on a daily basis across those 12 locations. So we have a large impact every day. We've got a captured audience of kids that come through the doors that we're influencing on a regular basis. During the school year, that looks like before and after school programming, and during the summer, all-day programming, 11 hours a day. That's going on right now in all of those club locations, and those kids are receiving great support. And annually, we strive to serve about 5,000 youth across the Kansas City Metro. So that gives you some idea of our reach across the community. We focus on 4 main program areas: education, public speaking and leadership, healthy lifestyles, and technology. The last point there, and it's connected directly to YPI, we do a ton of ad hoc programming. So what we try to do is be keenly aware of the needs across the community, the needs that our kids have, and be responsive to those needs in order to help them overcome whatever obstacles that may exist. An example of that is this summer, we've run what we call We Own Fridays. So essentially what that is, it gives young people ages 13 to 18 a safe place to be on Friday evenings. We've run that every Friday night this summer at our Thornberry unit on 43rd in Cleveland, and have had some impressive participation. This past Friday gave me a little bit of a heart palpitation, but we had 190 teens in that club participating in positive experiences as opposed to finding other places to hang out across the community. And so we're doing that because we perceive that there's a need for young people to have a place to go rather than hanging out at the mall or the plaza. I'm sure you've heard all about that. We are being proactive in giving them a place to be. So there's a ton of ad hoc programming that we do, but the most intense and the most effective is that of the Youth Police Initiative. So I do have a video here. I hope that it's going to queue up. It's only 2 minutes long. It's going to give you a quick description of YPI, and I hope I have sound here as well. Doesn't look like I have sound.
This program is something that I believe in because it allows officers and the youth of America to be able to come into a room together and communicate with each other, share experiences. And when that happens, I believe it creates a bond where the kids can see that some of the police officers that are in the program did the same exact things that they did when they were younger, and they were able to get back on the right track and end up being positive citizens in the world. And for the kids, that humanizes the police, where it's just not a person with a badge and a gun who wants to tell them what to do. So the sessions are typically a week long, which is, we do 5 days, 4 to 5 days, and each day we do about 2.5 hours. And the way that it's set up, the beginning of the week, we start with just the youth so that we can go ahead and work together to set ground rules and expectations. And then we move forward doing some activities. Closer to the middle of the week, we start to sprinkle in some of the police officers so that we can start incorporating them into what we're doing with the youth. And by Friday, it's a full house. Everybody, all hands on deck, all officers, all youth, as well as family members that would like to come to the celebration at the end of the class. A lot of my teens that did the first session bragged about what they did to others, and immediately after the first session, I had other kids flocking to me trying to figure out what they can do to be included in the next session. That tells me something that we are doing is right, because we're having people that don't want to have anything to do with this at all at the beginning, but by the time we get to the end of the week and the end of the session, everybody has bought in. Everybody is on board, and everybody is full go 100%.
How long have you been doing this?
So it's been 3 years running, so I'm gonna get into a little bit of the information there. So the initial pilot was conducted in towards the middle of 2018, so 2018. In fact, that was my first year coming into the organization. And so we spent a lot of time kind of talking about completing that pilot successfully. So you can see there, I did include the initial cost of the program, and it could give you a bit of sticker shock, but I decided to include that on the slide because it shows the investment that we've made in this program. So within that cost were some kind of one-time expenses that we don't have to incur on a regular basis. But this program, it started actually on the East Coast in the Boston area, and was created by an organization called the North American Family Institute. And so they kind of created the program and implemented it in the Boston area in neighborhoods that look a lot like the neighborhoods where we're located here in Kansas City. And they work with youth and made a tremendous difference there, and created a curriculum and training program to go along with that. And so as part of the initial pilot, as we learned about the great work that was going on there, we had trainers that were officially trained, and we had to purchase curriculum related to the program itself. And so that costs money, and it took time, and it took some dedication and partnership, true partnership, with the Kansas City Police Department. So not only do we have staff that are trained, you saw one of our trainers there represented on the video. He's actually a teen services director at our J&D Wagner unit, and has worked with this program, YPI, from its inception. So we have officially 4 trained trainers within our organization, and then we also have trained trainers within the Kansas City Police Department. So that shows the commitment that the chief has and his staff has to this great initiative. There was an evaluation component that we paid for in the initial pilot, and then also some program management expenses. So there was a large investment at the beginning because we recognized the opportunity that this program could have and that we could take advantage of here in Kansas City. So that initial year, we had 72 youth go through the program. We talk about the youth a little bit. So those 1,000 kids that we see every day in our clubs, we call them members. They're a member of the club. And those are kids that are already on a positive track. They're getting the support and the wraparound services that they need in order to be successful. And some of them could benefit from this program, but we recognize there's a whole other group of teens out in the community that may not be connected with the clubs that could benefit from this work. And so what we intentionally do as part of the Youth Police Initiative is we go out and recruit those teens, particularly teens that are going to have close contact with officers. You know, maybe some teens that have made a mistake or two, a misstep or two, and we want to catch them where they are, bring them in, and give them an opportunity to be influenced by this program. So the goal of the program, you heard a little bit of it there in the video, is to force dialogue and conversation between police officers who are patrolling the neighborhoods and the teens that live and play and work in those neighborhoods. And it's all about perceptions and changing perceptions in a positive way. So changing the perception of the teens that are going through the program, so those 13 to 18-year-olds that may view officers in a certain light, in some cases a negative light. So it's important that we have an impact on their overall perception, but just as important, the officers that are participating in this program and helping them change their perceptions of the young people that they're coming into close contact with on a regular basis, and making sure that they understand and see those young people as human beings, not the enemy, that kind of thing. So very powerful program. So these 72 youth, the majority of them coming from the community, not necessarily with a previous relationship with the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Kansas City, went through the program successfully. We had about 34 officers that also completed the cohorts and the programming in the club. So that was the initial year. That kind of extended into 2019. And as you can imagine, COVID-19 had an impact on us all, right? And so we were not able to expand the program during the course of 2020 the way that we had initially intended, but we're back in full swing. And so what we've been able to do since summer of 2020, when we reopened our doors to work with youth in person for the first time since the pandemic kind of reared its ugly head, we were able to expand both to from the Wagner unit to the Thornberry unit. And right now we're able to institute that program for about $15,000 a cohort. And again, there are very real expenses here related to our staff, the training, the facility, the officers, the curriculum. We also have incentives for the young people to complete the program. So what's the best way to get the attention of a young person, particularly a teen? 2 things. You feed them and you pay them, right? And so we do that as part of the program. So if they successfully complete and participate throughout that full cohort period, which is about a week, they do receive an incentive there. We have a formal graduation. You see a picture of that represented there, not only with our young people, but you see the officers that have completed that program as well represented there. So since summer of 2020, 41 youth have gone through the program, and we've had 20 officers from the Kansas City Police Department. I think there's lots of opportunity here for us to do more. Obviously, we want to run as many kids through this program as we can. So we're actively planning for additional cohorts within these 2 locations. But don't forget, I have locations all across the Kansas City Metro. So if it's good for a kid that lives near 24th and Elmwood, and it's good for a kid that lives on or near 43rd and Cleveland, that happens to be the East Patrol, it's good for a kid that lives in South Kansas City or North Kansas City, et cetera, et cetera. So what we're looking for are ways to expand this program. And so we're actively looking for resource development opportunities. I do want to acknowledge that some of the initial funding and ongoing funding came courtesy of Kansas City Police Department Foundation. They made an initial seed gift for that pilot year. This past year, Chief Smith and I were able to partner up, and he made sure that there was some funding available that kind of flowed through the department. We had to go through a few pieces of bureaucracy in order to get that funding, but he was at the table and helped lead that great effort. And then we have great supporters across the community that believe in the work that we're doing holistically, but for this program specifically, that help us to offset the expenses related to the program. And so we're constantly looking for ways to expand, and that involves raising additional dollars. So Mayor, I know that you're looking for ways to support community programming around the community, particularly programming aimed at improving the lives of young people, introducing them to brighter futures, helping them be productive citizens, workforce development, et cetera. Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Kansas City is a ready partner in those endeavors and efforts. And I think as exemplified by the Youth Police Initiative, we stand ready to help you and everybody in this room achieve those great efforts. So I'll stop there. I know that you all have a very busy schedule, and I'll answer any questions that you might have for me.
Any questions?
I'll just say very briefly, if that's all right. Thank you so much, Dr. Scott, for the work you're doing. When I look at the one picture that you showed through a lot of the presentation, the police officers and the young people in the same room talking, getting to know each other, that is the core of everything that I think we're all trying to build. And we've had a lot of conversations about what to do later in the process today. I appreciate that we're focusing on through this and with this presentation what we're doing earlier with young people, because missed in all of this is I don't think any of us want our young people getting addicted to narcotics, so there's a question as to be arrested or not, or getting into the sort of trouble that creates concerns. And so I thank you for that. As we've reopened, are you back to kind of normal programming, or is it still, kind of this half-seas thing? And I'm thinking mainly about the next school year, if we'll be able to kind of work with you all on programs being back to what they once were.
Mayor, great question. We've been working with youth in person since, the end of May 2020. So we felt like it was important to open up our doors to provide support to young people. So we ran our summer programming in person last summer. We honored all of the guidance from the city and local health departments regarding social distancing, masks, et cetera. So our capacity last summer was lower than what we typically like to see. So we only served about 40% of the kids that we like to see come through the doors every day. Going into the school year, we actually ran programming all day long to support virtual learning. We hired certified teachers to help kids that were remote learning all across the community, and then opened up again this summer thanks to some of the, easement of some of the restrictions related to COVID-19. So we're back to full capacity within our club. So right now, we've got 1,200 kids all across the metro that are being served in person by our staff.
God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything, Don?
No, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for your work.
Thank you for,
I have two things, Dr. Scott.
Yes.
You said you had an evaluation done on the first program. Is there any way you can share that evaluation with us?
Yes.
And then number two, do you get any dollars from combat?
We do receive funding from Combat, but those dollars are specific to some other programs that we run. So there are not any Combat funds that offset the expenses related to YPI.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
All right. So Chief, do you want to go back to where we were, or you want to go ahead with social services while we're there?
Either, whatever you'd like to do, sir.
Let's get into our regular agenda and crime reporting, gun crime, homicide. Who is making that report?
I'll begin, sir. Just a moment while we set up the PowerPoint.
And do you know what tab you're under?
Yes, sir, D.
D? All right, because we're all over the board this time.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning. Good morning.
If you refer to the Daily Homicide Analysis Report, commonly known as the Blue Sheet, you'll observe that to date we've had 85 homicides in 2021 compared to 110 at the same time in 2020. This is a 29% decrease year to date. There were 79 homicides at the same time in 2019, 68 homicides in 2018, and 85 homicides in 2017. And we have cleared 55 homicides in the current year, including those that occurred in previous years. Moving on to non-fatal shootings. In June 2021, we had 42 non-fatal shooting victims compared to 72 in June of the previous year. That's a 42% decrease for the month. Overall, non-fatal shootings were down 32% from January through the end of June compared to the same time period in the previous year. From July 1 to July 26, there have been additional 60 non-fatal shooting victims. If you look at the third page in your book, you will note that we have included a new report titled June 2021 Non-Fatal Shootings. It provides information regarding the percentage of cooperative victims and goes into greater detail regarding victim and suspect demographics. If you refer to that report, you will see that of the 42 non-fatal shooting victims, 27 were cooperative. This means that 15 victims, or 36%, were initially uncooperative with police and did not wish to pursue charges against whomever shot them. This report also breaks down victims and suspects by their race and gender. For example, you'll see that black males accounted for 60% of the non-fatal shooting victims in this month. This is the largest percentage of non-fatal shooting victims. White males and black females tied for second with 14% each. We've also broken down the victims and suspect ages into several groups: 0 to 16, 17 to 24, 25 to 34, 35 to 44, and 45 and over. The 17 to 24 age group had the most victims during the reporting period with 31%, closely followed by the 25 to 34 age group with 29%. KCPD is actively engaged in several different initiatives to reduce gun violence, and Captain Justin Colbart is going to come forward and discuss one of these programs, the Public Safety Partnership.
Good morning.
Morning.
Still morning, okay. Thank you for having me here this morning to discuss the Public Safety Partnership and some of the initiatives that are closely related to that. I do think it's important to take a few moments. I was asked to keep this brief, and I will, but certainly these are some big projects that we've been working on. I know they've been discussed in here, so I'm going to try to highlight just briefly a little bit of the background and how some of these programs tie together. So first of all, primarily with this Public Safety Partnership, this is a slide I just took from the website. We'll talk about some of the successes on a couple of these slides, but I really want to highlight the partners in this. This is not a KCPD-specific program. This is a partnership with Kansas City in mind, not just the police department. So it is the ATF, FBI, the prosecutor's office, police department, probation and parole, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the DEA, and the United States Marshals. And there's some areas of focus up there. Again, these are pretty general across this program at the sites around the country. I'd encourage you, if you're interested in it, the website is pretty robust and highlights a lot of this, and you can see how the Public Safety Partnership is working across the country. So for Kansas City, in September of 2018, we became a site for the Public Safety Partnership. I've been involved in it since that time. I went with Deputy Chief, name's escaping me, Bosworth. We went down to Birmingham, Alabama to represent the police department, and representatives from all of our partner agencies also attended that with us. It was a great opportunity to learn about the program, but also kind of see where we gauged with other sites across the country. And I really came away from that feeling pretty good about a lot of the things that we were doing in Kansas City, and also coming away with some things that we could improve on. So first and foremost, the PSP is not a grant, but a BJA program that seeks to promote interagency coordination by leveraging specialized law enforcement expertise with dedicated prosecutorial resources to promote public and community safety. I equate this to, in some respects, kind of like having a consultant. We have subject matter experts that are able to help guide us through their program, identifying maybe some weaknesses, some strengths, and connecting us with resources and communities and agencies across the country that are maybe doing something in an area that we would like to do better and that we can learn from them. There is funding available for training and technical assistance that's generally used to either send us to some sites, which we'll talk about briefly, or to bring in some subject matter experts to do some assessments here and provide some input on ways that we could do better. So this is a 3-year track program, and we're actually due to expire out of this next month. However, I believe we're in the process of finalizing a 1-year extension that they're pretty much giving to all the programs due to COVID. So how does that tie into violent crime investigations? So early on in this PSP process, changes were made to how we investigate non-fatal shootings as a department. KCPD had already been exploring options of reorganization to place a higher emphasis on shootings by creating an assault unit and removing that responsibility from the homicide unit. I know you guys were a part of those discussions. That's something that really the PSP kind of kick-started us down that path. We conducted a site visit to Milwaukee to observe their shoot review process, and internal analysis that we conducted here showed the need to expand our resources toward non-fatal shootings. So about that time, I was actually in my current assignment previously in the Law Enforcement Resource Center. We conducted a reorganization and created an assault unit, and I was moved over to that role and was asked to kind of come up with some solutions to how we could improve what we were doing with non-fatal shootings. One of those things led us to Milwaukee. PSP funded us going up there along with representatives from our federal partners and the prosecutor's office to see what they were doing. When we came back, we had made these changes and really sent the justification up to expand our detective resources, which fortunately the chief and the executive leadership agreed that that was something that needed to be done. We all know that's not easy. To add 12 positions, our budget certainly didn't increase by 12 positions, so there's a cost that comes with that, but it was something that needed to be done, and fortunately we were able to do that. With that realignment, the Crime Gun Intelligence Center was also moved from the LERC to this new assault unit so that we could focus all the efforts in one unit to focus on identifying the shooters in our community. The ATF, Operation Legend came around at a similar time, and the ATF also approached us about how they could support this endeavor. And so they were good partners with the Crime Gun Intelligence Center, as well as we come across cases with a potential federal nexus, they're able to be a great resource and liaison to have alternatives if we need to identify and get these shooters off the street. KCPD did take lessons from Milwaukee Shoot Review. We implemented our weekly shooting review meeting in January of 2020. Those have been held weekly. Since then, COVID had some minor disruptions to that, where we had to do some over the phone, but in general, these have been weekly meetings since January of 2020. Every homicide and non-fatal shooting incident is evaluated for investigative support, risk for retaliation, and social services. So I know there's been a lot of talk recently about NOVA and some of the successes we had with NOVA and how that's not around. I think this is something that the police department and our partners in this really step forward to fill in some of those gaps, especially when it comes to violent crime reduction. And I'll talk about some of these other caveats in some upcoming slides. PSP Assessments, I mentioned how part of this program is subject matter experts and bringing them in to evaluate some things that we're doing and make recommendations. These are some categories that they assisted in. Again, I want to highlight, it's not just KCPD. This is the Kansas City PSP. So this is our local, county, state, federal partners. That all dovetail into a strategic plan. So the PSP strategic plan was developed to provide a roadmap for improving an already robust partnership amongst the criminal justice partners in Kansas City. I specifically put in there this already robust partnership. One of the things going back to September of 2018 when I attended the symposium, as a cohort with, again, our state and federal partners, we attended each session. And I remember sitting in a session on local and federal partnerships. And it was a representative from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Chicago. And it took about 3 minutes of that class to learn that we were actually doing things much more robustly and better than they were. And it wasn't led by the police department. This was our U.S. Attorney's Office speaking with theirs about initiatives and policies and procedures that we have here that are actually better. And so it ended up being, instead of us having a class, we were really teaching the subject matter expert how they could go back and improve. And so there's certainly areas to improve for us as a department and as a community, but I really feel like when we see what other areas are doing, we certainly have a lot to be proud of here in Kansas City amongst all of the partners. So back then, way back in 2018, this idea of prevention, intervention, and enforcement was kind of proposed, and it's morphed over a couple years into a written document. The prevention strategy was decided to be chaired by A.J. Herman with the Mayor's Office. For intervention, Mike Mansur with the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office, and myself as a representative of the Police Department for the enforcement strategy. Obviously, each of these are important. I think we all know that. The Police Department obviously becomes a large partner when we're talking about violence reduction, but I think when we talk about things like the Youth Police Initiative and other endeavors that are getting to the matter well before, hopefully, there is police enforcement involvement, that's when I think we can really start to discuss and hope for a transformational change in our violent crime problem. But certainly, we're all equal partners in that. This strategy and this strategic plan was developed out of the Public Safety Partnership. Bi-weekly conference calls are held, and they have been since 2018, involving all partners and PSP leadership. This has been a great tool to have accountability and a uniform approach. Every 2 weeks, we all know we're on the same page and what we're working towards, and people are held accountable to those tasks. With that, that'll dovetail into our violence reduction program, which is a new board that's been created and evolved. So during this PSP experience, it was decided that the former KC Nova board could be a good option to sustain the work started under the Public Safety Partnership. So the Violence Reduction Board was created with that goal in mind. I think that's still a temporary name. There was a name for a day or two that I think was found to be used for somebody else, so that may change. This board has held several meetings, I believe 3 meetings now, and taken representatives from the prior NOVA board and expanded with some other community leaders. This process is ongoing as the board looks to find its final structure and purpose. The partners are currently working to secure a burn grant we're hopeful for to help provide some funding. They're also looking to fund and staff an executive officer position. Again, the idea for this board came out of the PSP with the hope of sustainment. You know, that's always a big factor when we talk about grants and programs. How do you sustain it? If you start seeing success, how do you keep it going? Well, the PSP thing is either going to end next month or in a year, and once that goes away and we don't have, you know, a strategic site liaison who's assigned to Kansas City and keeping the team together and on task, who fills that void? The hope is this board does. There's been some meetings, there's been some new members added, and we hope that the goal of that board does continue to be the successful continuation of this partnership and the good things that we've done. So the last thing I was asked to talk about was risk for retaliation. And I talked briefly about how this tied into the shoot review process. So this is part of the shoot review. Our Gang Intelligence Squad, which is assigned to the Law Enforcement Resource Center, coordinates this program. They utilize reports, criminal history, geography, human intelligence, and investigative leads to determine the potential for retaliatory violence. This is a process that goes back to KC Nova and something that the police department continues today with some of our partners. Just to expand on it real quick, in a nutshell, the risk for retaliation, every homicide and non-fatal shooting, as we discussed, is reviewed at shoot review. Our gang intelligence unit does that. As part of their review and intelligence gathering on every case, they triage each incident for the risk of retaliation. And this can be through investigative leads, human intelligence, social media postings. They're looking at anything they can to determine if retaliation is possible out of these incidents. Sometimes we don't have cooperation and it's hard to know anything about it, but we can assume there's going to be something. But they really go through every detail they can to try to triage those cases. Of the incidents that are identified that have a potential for retaliation based off the information available, there is a messaging process that our detectives go through to connect with the people involved in these incidents and to hopefully prevent future acts of violence. One thing we noticed, that Gang Intelligence Squad is a single squad, five detectives, an analyst, and a supervisor. They can't handle all of the homicide and non-fatal shooting incidents and deal with the retaliation of every single incident. They are amazing people and they do awesome work, but it needed to grow. So the Gang Intelligence Squad came up with a plan. They expanded the program and trained 157 officers, detectives, and sergeants to assist with this program. They've also trained probation and parole, the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office, and our KC Nova client advocates who continue to work under the KC Nova program. In our training, we emphasize our message as a conversation, not an interview or an interrogation. Resources and social services are utilized to stop the violence. With this expanded program, more messaging is completed than ever before. The easiest way of showing that is, again, we had 5 people doing this before. Now we have 157 that are doing it. So we're not just getting the worst of the worst. We're able to get the what we could say maybe are a little less likely for retaliation, but still able to get involved in that situation and have a good human conversation with somebody in hopes of preventing future violence. And there's a lot of things that go into that. Again, social services, anything we can do to prevent that cycle from continuing. The hope is that these conversations help in the effort to stop the cycle of retaliatory violence in our community. And I'll close with this. I really, truly think this is a unique program. I've done some looking. I have not been directly involved with this program until I was transferred back over to the Law Enforcement Resource Center. But learning about it and seeing it through shoot review, it caused me to do some looking. I looked around at some other agencies. I could not find anybody that was doing something similar. From talking with the people that have been doing this since Nova started, it sounds like it's kind of grown organically out of some messaging that was done through Nova. And it's really grown and become what we've turned it into, which is an expanded program here in Kansas City. It's really hard to prove a negative. I can't tell you how many people haven't been murdered or haven't been shot because of the program, but I can 100% tell you that there has been incidents of retaliation that have not happened because of the program and because of the people that are willing to do that work and that extra effort in sending the correct message. So that's all I have. I'm certainly happy to entertain any questions. I know there were some big topics there that we kind of blew through real quick, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
I know we're being real quick. I will just say very simply this. Thank you, Captain Cobalt. I think the work that you all have done is quite impressive. I had the opportunity to talk through this program with the Department of Justice recently, and actually some other mayors, including former police chief, the mayor of Tampa, who spoke highly of our efforts thus far. And I encourage us to continue on the risk for retaliation points. I think that will be a true game changer in the results we're seeing in our community. Nobody can measure what the changes we're seeing in shooting activity this year and homicides are attributed to. I do believe, though, anecdotally, we've seen real progress. So you're to be commended on that, and I thank you for the additional information. We're running behind today. It doesn't mean we're not interested in all this, so just thank you.
Thank you.
I just got some information from the Police Foundation of Kansas City, Missouri last week, and I think you've maybe seen it, but Well, most of the major cities in the country, the average increase in homicides is over 30%. Kansas City, we had an increase in homicides. It was awful, but it was that kind of year, and we had 15% increase. This year, the major cities also have a big increase in homicides, whereas we have a reduction of 23%. So that says something to what we're doing.
Yeah, I agree. We've done a lot of looking at that. I actually discussed that at the Violence Reduction Program Board meeting. And it's not just big cities, it's mid-sized cities, it's Midwest cities, and we went through a bunch of them: Memphis, Indianapolis, Milwaukee. St. Louis has actually seen a slight reduction too, which is great for them. But across the board, I think it was up 30% nationwide last year, and year to date, as of a couple weeks ago, it was up another 20%. So all these communities broke their records last year and are still accelerating at a higher rate this year than they were last year. Fortunately, we are not. It's not, to pat anybody on the back. There's nothing to be very extremely proud of, but we're happy that the numbers are down, but we still have a lot of work to do. But I do think a lot of these programs are helping and making a difference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, if I may, I think I'm supposed to jump in here on D, other crime. And I think the intent today and going forward is for the Patrol Bureau to jump in and highlight some positive enforcement action that's been going on recently. So what I'd like to highlight today is one thing that we noticed is that weather warned, we noticed a trend of firearms being stolen from cars around the entertainment districts. So as a result of that, CPD Property Crimes, Center Patrol Division, CPD Impact, East Impact, and the ATF began digging into the reports, identifying patterns, and we began surveillance in the entertainment districts on the weekends, especially late at night. Since April, there have been 74 guns stolen from cars around the entertainment districts. As a result of the investigation and surveillance, 4 suspects have been arrested, 2 of whom have been charged federally, and the other 2 are still pending charges. And last week, I'm happy to say there was only 1 theft from auto report from the entertainment areas, so that's a good thing. We do have other suspects identified, and we plan to continue the investigation and the surveillance work to keep it tamped down, but it was a good effort by all, and we hope that the TFAs stay down.
Excuse me, I'll get my slides loaded up very quickly. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Captain Jonas Boffman. I'm currently in our Financial Services Unit, but I'm here to talk to you today about our risk-based policing strategy. I know no one likes very long meetings, and we're already behind, so I'll do my best to keep this as brief as possible, but I want to make sure I accent some key points. The strategy here, we deployed it from April 2019 through March of 2020. At that time, obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic was rolling out, and so we decided to put things on hold as we learned to operate in that new environment. But we have since taken an empirical look at our efforts and the results of what we performed with some academic partners at Rutgers University, and I'm here to present those findings to you today, tell you kind of how we went about it, and offer some next steps. So I'll quickly define what risk-trained modeling and risk-based policing are. Again, I'll provide a deeper dive into the results from our first year, provide you insights about specifically how we went about achieving those outcomes, and then again, next steps, what we hope to do moving forward, not just within the police department, but outside the PD, to build on our success. So to quickly define what RTM, risk-trained modeling, is, it started about 11 years ago in the criminology department out of Rutgers University in New Jersey, and it's an analysis technique where it looks at features of the landscape of a community, a neighborhood, a city, things that a lot of us may take for granted, such as vacant buildings, property violations, perhaps things like liquor stores, but anything that can possibly contribute to crime is put on a map, and then we overlay, simply stated, how all those risk factors are in one single place. And the idea being, if we can correlate that with crime, we can attack crime from the inside out from a more preventive scope by addressing those environmental features as opposed to more person-placed information. And risk-based policing is just simply the broader application of RTM as a public safety strategy. And the term risk-based policing tends to be used when a police department deploys this technology and this ideology, but several civic entities, City Halls, I believe Austin and Dallas have deployed it, Newark, New Jersey, It's given a different name. I think it's data-informed community engagement, but it uses the same principles. But it's not just a policing strategy. It's meant to be a truly holistic approach to public safety and crime prevention. So before moving forward, I want to make the point that this is not a black box, secret algorithm kind of data crunching. Think of it more like meteorologists trying to predict, when a thunderstorm might hit Kansas City. It's not, perfect. Hopefully we want our weather folks to be more accurate than not, but the idea is what are the conditions that might cause a thunderstorm, for example? And that's exactly what we're doing here. We're trying to see what underlying features of an area are going to generate or attract crime, and how do we address those factors to prevent crime from happening in the first place. So this is not meant to be some big data predictive policing kind of piece. It's more making an educated guess where we think crime is likely to occur. And so to carry on that thought with another metaphor, if you think of why families take their children to play at parks and whatnot, it's because there are a lot of features of that landscape that are attractive to play. Obviously, this park here, good old Penguin Park, is going to be much more attractive than a grassy field with nothing there. But if we start to take away those features, such as that play set in the front or the landmark penguin, chances are fewer and fewer families are going to take their kids to play there. And we've found that fighting and preventing crime can work very much the same way. As we reduce some of these risky features of a neighborhood, the opportunities for crime will be less and less frequent. So we're looking to prevent crime from happening in the first place instead of just purely reactive measures. And we found this will be the fourth time we've deployed this strategy over the last 10 years ourselves. And each time we've kind of scaled it up to make it bigger and bigger, and our results have gotten better and better each time as well. So we're excited to see what's next in store for us. To quickly touch on some of the results we found, again, our evaluation period, we deployed this strategy from April 2019 through March of 2020, and we looked at what we call violent street crime, so murders, shootings, and armed robberies, and we compared that to the year prior. And we were very pleased to see that we had a 22% reduction in those violent crime types in the areas where we deployed the strategy. These are academic partners at Rutgers. They crunched the numbers for us. These are statistically significant findings, meaning we can believe that what we did attributed to these drops. It wasn't random chance or some other effect. But we also wanted to know that officers were doing what we asked them to do. Since it was based on crime prevention, there was a 57% reduction in officers' self-initiated proactive stops that resulted in arrest or summons, outcomes of that sort. So that's exactly what we wanted to see. Crime reductions without over-policing, making a difference without relying strictly on punitive measures like arrests and summonses and things of that sort. So we were very pleased to see those results there. Let me take a quick sip of water. Get nervous when I have to speak in public. All right, so how do we go about achieving these results, which again is what I know the police department wants. I hope the community is happy to see that we could have positive impacts on crime without resorting to arresting only. So if you think about, this is a quick little map with some crime data around the area of Armour and Troost. So if you think about what police would typically do, all right, we had some crimes here, we know where they occurred, maybe there's some suspect information, but our response is purely reactive. Now, to be fair, we're always going to have to be reactive in some capacity. We can't not hold offenders accountable. That's part of what we do. But when we apply risk-train modeling to this, and those blue squares there are the cells that will let us know where areas are higher risk than others. The data we put in the system, again, is purely environmental. There's nothing person-based here. We're not looking at arrest data. We're not looking at any demographic data, not even probation parolee data. It's all purely environmental. So if you were to walk down the street, drive down the street in your car, what are you seeing? Are you seeing a vacant building next to a liquor store or a bus stop? And so with the example shown here, we can see that these might be the underlying factors that are driving some of that crime. And in fact, I worked this area in patrol when we deployed the strategy, and I can say for a quick example that the liquor store, the bus stop, and the cell phone store were all interrelated in driving a lot of the violent crime in that area. Folks would loiter at the bus stop, and I believe there was some minor drug trade going on at the cell phone store, so we did have to do the enforcement piece there. But from a more preventive scope, we worked with the fire marshal to address some property violations at the liquor store and cell phone store. We worked with ATA to relocate that bus stop, and we made sure that we weren't going to interfere with the folks that need the bus stop for transportation. And there were, luckily enough, a couple bus stops just down the block in other direction that were still easily accessible. But we relocated the bus stop, that cut down on the loitering, which cut down on some other quality of life issues with the businesses there, and crime dropped double digits in this area, and we sustained that for well over a year, which was exactly what we want. So we tried to change the environment from the inside out to prevent crime from happening in the first place, instead of just relying on pure enforcement measures. So for next steps,
We're already in talks with department heads at City Hall by virtue of our city manager to try and get some meetings with whether it's Public Works, Neighborhood Preservation, regulated industries, ourselves, just to kind of see how we can all use our team data as a guidepost to make us work collectively in these same challenged areas identified by the model. There are also department resources we hope to use in more proactive ways as well, whether it's our social workers, maybe as we see we're working these challenged areas with folks from City Hall, wherever, are there families that we can offer more wraparound services to in these areas to make those folks more resilient. I know Boys and Girls Club was up here, combat. I mean, we can really partner with anyone in these areas that want to really help us devote everything in a single area instead of police department working over here, combat working over here, and instead of spreading ourselves too thin, let's maximize what we can in the same areas for the benefit of all. And I think I wanted to mention a couple points too that Prosecutor Gene Peters-Baker mentioned, that not all communities are the same, and that geography is also important. And funnily enough, this is exactly what we're talking about here with this type of program, because as we look at those risk factors, as we're called, and we map those, it can account for nuances in different parts of the city. And so we found, for example, I believe in Metro Patrol, laundromats were significant and correlated with violent crime, but in Center and East Zone, they were not. So we're able to actually apply this data in a way that actually gets down to a very specific level, so we don't want to use the same blanket approach for every community across the city. And there's risk throughout the city as well. It's not just localized south of the river. I happen to live up north, but I live actually quite close to a high-risk area, just judging by the data. So this is really meant to be, how can we be most effective with the limited resources we have and partner with others that want to help us along that, with that goal in mind. So in conclusion, really the idea of risk-based policing is as easy as 1, 2, 3. We look at the environmental data, make some risk terrain maps. We work with our partners to direct resources in the most challenged, most vulnerable areas, and we can measure and evaluate how we're doing. And that's where our partnership with Rutgers University has proven to be very beneficial. They've worked with us from the beginning, again, well over 10 years now, each time we deployed this to help us empirically evaluate our findings to make sure what we're doing is working, and if not, how do we adjust? And in the end, that just helps us diagnose, deploy, and prevent, which will make our communities safer for all in the end. So I apologize for the very quick, rapid speech, but I'm happy to help with any questions or anything that any of you may have about how this works or what we plan to do next.
Outstanding presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Very, very good presentation. Anything, Ms. Dean?
No,
Thank you.
All right, so we had the homicide, bullet to skin, public safety partnership. Was this the risk terrain modeling? All right. So who's handling cases filed?
I'll do that too.
All right.
Now we'll discuss case submissions to county prosecutors' offices. During the month of June, KCPD submitted a total of 406 cases to county prosecutors' offices. In 184 of those cases, a subject was charged in custody or a warrant was issued during the same month. There was approximately a 1% increase in the total number of cases presented to prosecutors' offices during the month of June 2021 compared to June of 2020. There was a 6% decrease in the total number of cases charged by county prosecutors' offices in 2021 compared to June of 2020. Last month, we reported on KCPD case dispositions for June 1, 2020 to May 31 of 2021. And we broke that information down by county. If you recall, we compared Jackson County, Clay County, Platte County, Cass County. After the meeting, the Platte County Prosecutor's Office reached out to us and indicated that their records differed from ours. So we sat down with them and went through every single case to see where there was a discrepancy. We determined that some of the cases had not been updated in our tracking system. And fugitive apprehension and arrangement section, or fugitive app, they're in charge with updating all of our information. So once we submit a case and a prosecutor files on it or sends it back for additional work or declines charges on it, they'll communicate that back to the case detective and fugitive app. And the fugitive app will do the updates. Well, if fugitive app doesn't get that information, then they won't make the update. So in several cases, we determined that there was a breakdown in communication, and so it wasn't updated in the system, and so therefore it wasn't reported in our numbers. But after we met with Platte County, we put some procedures in place that hopefully will fix that moving forward in the future, some checks and balances, so we'll catch those cases. So I don't want to go over the entire report again, but I think I'd be remiss if I didn't point out a few stats. Platte County, in the previous report, showed that Platte County charged 36% of their violent cases that were submitted, compared to an average of 49% of all cases combined in the other counties. However, now we show that during the reporting period, Platte County filed on 60% of their violent crime cases submitted. And so this was the highest percentage of the 3 counties in which we filed violent crimes cases last year. We also had to correct one of the formulas in our report that calculated the percentage of cases that were awaiting disposition at the end of the reporting period. For example, we previously showed that in 76% of the cases of property crimes cases in Jackson County, 76% were awaiting disposition at the end of the reporting period. And then we also showed that it was 44% for Clay and Platte County. After redoing our numbers, the actual numbers are 45% for Jackson County, 27% for Clay County, and 25% for Platte County. So all of the counties had significantly fewer cases still under review at the end of the reporting period than previously reported. You also should note that Clay County is in the process of completing a case review similar to what we did with Platte County. And so I have no doubt that their percentage of cases filed will increase too once they're done with that review. However, we had twice the amount of cases submitted to them, so it's just taking them a little longer than it did for Platte. Specifically with Jackson County, due to their close proximity to headquarters and the sheer number of cases that we submit to them, we're confident that our numbers are much more accurate with them, but we're welcome to do a review with them the same way and make sure we're as accurate as possible. That's all I have to report unless you have questions.
Oh, thank you. Great report. All right. Social Services, Lindsay Moran.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lindsay Moran. I'm a social worker with the police department. I currently serve at our Metro Patrol Division, so 75th and Prospect. I've been with our department for about 3 years now. Prior to that, I was a social worker in the emergency room at Children's Mercy. So I'm pretty involved with a lot of our violent crime and how it impacts children and families. I am excited and sad to provide this presentation to you all today. The reality is children should never have to live a life without their mother, and certainly not because of the violent act of another person who was responsible for their care and safety. However, because of the support of this department, our chief, and the community of Kansas City, our officers and our social service team have had the opportunity to get to know and love the children of Andrea Dean. It's important to note, by the way, that we have clear permission from their grandma to share this story and the pictures of these kiddos. July 2nd, 3 children ran to their neighbor's house, a neighbor they did not know, crying and asking for help because they had just witnessed their mother murdered right in front of them by the father of their youngest sibling. As detectives quickly investigated, located, and charged the suspect, the children were released into the care of their maternal grandmother. Pastor Wainwright reached out to Kansas City Police Department CIO Sanders to ask for help for the family, as the grandmother had just taken on 3 young children, and she was in need of basic supplies such as clothing. Because of our investigation, they still didn't have access to their home. CIO Sanders and our Central Patrol Social Services, Brooke McQuiller, and some of the other Center's own officers put together the cash from their wallets to buy a little bit of clothing for the kiddos. Brooke looped me in because the grandmother's home was in Metro, and so it was an easy ask for my officers to help me shop for clothing for these kids on a Friday afternoon. The community was naturally curious when uniformed officers were shopping in the middle of the day. The store manager, who certainly had not called the police, approached and asked us why we were there. And after we explained the situation, he gave us a discount on as many items as we could to ensure that we could buy as much as possible with our officers' money. This would end up being the first of many situations where the community stepped up to make a difference for Andrea's children simply just from hearing their story. When we arrived at Grandma's house, the kids met us on the front porch. They hugged the officers, and one of the kids stuck out his hand and said, "Thanks for arresting him, he killed my mom." We reassured the children of how brave they had been when they told their story to the Protection Center, and we told them how the information that they gave detectives helped us arrest and charge the man who'd hurt their mom. Once inside, the boys challenged officers to a push-up contest, while Sister and I carefully examined each skirt and dress before folding them nicely and putting them away. As children do sometimes after traumatic events, she started telling us a bit about what had happened to her. You can see her in her bright colored dress and her pearls. She's very girly. She just looked at me and said, "My mommy was shot right here, and she was bleeding so bad." I just had to look at her and say, "I'm sorry, that's not fair, and things like that should never happen." Officers checked in on Grandma during this visit as well. She had obviously lost her daughter and was not able to grieve or truly walk through that experience yet because she was now taking on the care of three little hearts. We asked several times if there was anything she needed, and initially she said no, but eventually confided in us that the bed that the children were trying to get out of the apartment had likely been damaged in the course of the events that day. We assured her we'd make sure all 3 children had new beds. We had no idea how our officers' wives and their families, retired KCPD members, and the community would come together in full force for these kids. A Metro Patrol officer donated full-size bunk beds and mattresses, while a retired KCPD sergeant and his wife made sure the boys would have color-coordinated comforters. Our crime lab donated brand new sheets and pillows. South Patrol Social Services found us a twin bed and frame for Sister, and community members made sure she had a bright pink comforter and a giant unicorn pillow for her bed. Community members dropped off tubs of clothing, shoes, toys, bikes, while somebody else on our department snuck into my office in the very early morning of the hours to secretly drop off new shoes, sandals, and toys, leaving only an unsigned note in a very familiar handwriting. Community members flooded our phones and emails asking to help the family. This included a paralegal from the Henry Service Law Office who wanted to make sure Grandma knew that they would walk her through the adoption process for all 3 children when that time comes. We were able to provide target cards for future needs, and even the manager at Ace Hardware donated some of the items we needed to put the bunk beds back together when once again officers were walking around in her store and she wanted to know what we were doing. The evening before we were set to deliver the beds, Grandma called and asked us to come back out to the home. They'd found a bullet hole in the front window of their home and a bullet lodged in the headboard of one of the beds. Officers responded to the home and took a report and documented the situation, and once again comforting these terrified children. I was able to be a part of that, but I also had to take a step back and compose myself because I thought, absolutely not, these children can't have something else happen to them. We believe this situation was a shooting intended for a similar looking house on a different block, but this speaks to the nonsense shooting from cars and violence that happens in our streets daily and the lack of regard for Kansas City and their children. Bed delivery day will be one of my favorite memories. Each kiddos received a box with their sheets, comforters, toys. Luckily, Sergeant Berg brought his tools, because when he asked me if we needed any tools, I said probably just like an Allen wrench. We definitely needed the tools. Officers assembled the bed 1.5 times after realizing the ladder end was in the wrong spot. All meanwhile, the kids were supervising. It was at this time that we learned E's 8th birthday was coming up, and he made sure Tori and I were writing down his requests for birthday gifts, including a drum set and a real motorcycle. Once beds were made and toys had been unboxed and played with, it was time for us to leave. I knew we'd been given a very generous Target card donation from a community member, and I asked Grandma if we could buy E the drum set that he had only mentioned about 10 times. She told us how he loves to play drums at church, and she would be thrilled for him to have a drum set of his own to play in the basement. With her permission, we set out to find the perfect drum set for him. The day before his birthday, their aunt texted me to make sure we were coming back because E had reminded them that the police said we would bring his birthday gifts, and she wanted to make sure we didn't forget. We returned to the home with a box almost too big for our car and surprised our sweet boy with his drum set. Sister cried the entire visit because it wasn't her birthday. He could only contain his excitement long enough to get one of the drums out of the package before he set it up to play on the porch, which I'm sure the neighbors were really thankful for. In the mix of all the phone calls and emails for assistance for this family, Rashid Brown, the director of security at Worlds of Fun, got in touch with Major Graves at our Shoal Creek Patrol Division and asked if they could invite the family for a day of fun there. When they reached out to the aunts, they learned that E's birthday was coming up soon, and they went all out. They invited the family, us, social services, our officers, to be part of the big day, where they got a lunch of all the essentials, chicken strips and pizza. They got to play with the Snoopy characters, and then got to go out into the park. The Worlds of Fun made sure that all of their cousins could come. I think it was maybe a total of like 20 people that they made this happen for these kids. So sitting back and watching all this happiness, my heart is still heavy. It's a blessing to have a community that comes together in a big way for children who've experienced tragedy, but I did catch myself saying to Rashid, thanks again, I'm sure we'll be in contact. We just have to do better as a city. Our social service team sits with families on homicide scenes. We hold babies who were in a car when it was shot up in a drive-by. We consistently respond to referrals and requests for assistance for families impacted by violence or through our Risk for Retaliation program. Like our officers, we'll continue to do this. We'll show up for children and families in our community when we need this, and we'll continue to wish that we didn't have to. We're so thankful for the support of our department, of you all, of our city, to allow us to continue to work in this way, and thank you for letting us share about a time that we definitely will not forget.
Wow, great presentation. Any questions or comments?
Make a very brief statement, because your commentary reminds me of a lot of things. When I was a little kid, my mom got beat up. We ended up at a police station. And to this day, part of why I love the work that you do, and I don't think there was a formal program back then, but there was an officer who had a teddy bear in 1990 or 91. And I'm thankful that they did. And it changes somebody from being angrier to knowing that despite all of the crap that's around them, that people care. And so I'm glad I saw that story. And I know you do a lot more of that every day. So thank you.
I think that, you know, our challenge is to present a balance, because the police have to be the police, but there are these services that help to show the human part and the human side of even the police department. So there are many people who view this online, and some are viewing it live. How do they contact social services to say, we'd like to help, or we'd like to be contacted when there are needs that arise?
Sure, I think one of the things we're working on right now is trying to get together a list of, we have several churches or community groups that when we have a specific need, such as maybe like a hotel, a bus ticket, those kind of things, we reach out to those people. If there are organizations, if there are individuals, anybody who feels like that's something that they have to contribute or they want to partner with our social services team, I would encourage them to reach out, probably starting with our media unit. You know, Sergeant Bakina and the folks in the media unit are really good about seeing things on Facebook or connecting people to us and getting a lot of those things, getting a lot of those pieces moving. And then we're happy to reach out, especially if it's a division specific. You know, I know we have some places out south that specifically want to help South Patrol or Central Zone or whatever those kind of things are. So if there are people that are interested in those kind of partnerships, we would absolutely welcome that. We are always trying to make a little, you know, a lot out of a little bit. So we would be happy to take anything like that, those sorts of partnerships and that sort of help.
So Chief, is there a way to have a formal contact?
I was just talking to Mike. I mean, obviously, when we started this program, things are growing right as we go on, but I think what we'll try and do is get a department email that will go to like social services so that it can be checked by any one of the social service advocates that we have on the police department. And then we can have a central account so that between that group, they can figure out which needs can help which people. But if we have a central depository, at least at the email level, I think that would help.
Right, yeah. Because I mean, it's just, I'm fighting back tears, you know, because it is great work. And when people are going through trauma, that is the greatest time, you know, to be able to be there so that it doesn't go into, mental illness and other things because people don't have the support. So I'm excited about the social services program. And thank you for your presentation.
Thank you for your time.
All right. Patrol divisions.
Yes. Hey, thank you, Lindsay. That was great. So unfortunately, I follow that with our patrol slideshow. So I promise not to elaborate for the sake of time, but I do think it's important to throw up some of the pictures that we have, and I'll just go through them briefly as soon as Dan's ready. Okay, so the first one, South Patrol movie nights, kind of a staple down at South Patrol. We're glad to say that we're kicking those back up again. And something that we do frequently is partner with other organizations around the city to help hand out basic needs and essentials. So there's a few pictures in here from a recent award ceremony. It was a pretty big one. The interesting thing about this is most officers would go through a 25 or 30-year career and never have an opportunity to save a life. This officer had 2 opportunities within weeks of each other, which is really remarkable, and he definitely performed well. So here's a repeat of the pictures of what Lindsay was talking about. And here's another life-saving award with the old white law out of the media office. And we're always happy to try to brighten somebody's day when we can. This young fella needed or asked for some police officers to help him celebrate his birthday, so we were happy to stop by and do what we could. And here's our community interaction officers. Here's another award that was recently given to Officer Saragusa for the Distinguished Service Medal, which is our 2nd highest award. And a family fun night, which Shoal Creek, that's kind of the Shoal Creek thing. And I think they try to do those monthly. And then here's another thing we were happy to participate in. This young fellow finished up his chemotherapy, and no kid should have to do that. So to help him celebrate, we were more than happy to be a part of that. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, comments? All right. Next is department staffing, Deputy Chief Hicks.
Good afternoon. You'll find the staffing report under tab E. Right now, KCPD has tab E.
Okay.
KCPD has 1,760 members. This is a 4.7% reduction from this time last year. Over budgeted strength, KCPD is supposed to have 2,026 members. We have 226 current vacancies, which is a 13% reduction based upon budgeted strength. We're continuing to see separations at a 17 member per month average level. For some comparison, in 2019, the whole year we lost 187 members and we hired 201. In 2020, we lost 189 members and we hired 111. To date, we've lost 120 members in 2021, and we've only hired 19.
That's fiscal year. That's fiscal year, sir? I.e., is that since May 1, or
No,
that's
it's from
that's
January
calendar?
1.
Okay.
Yeah.
Understood. It's dramatic. I just wanted to make sure it hasn't been 3 months.
Yes, it's dramatic. So this impacts our bureaus specifically. The most impacted, of course, is our patrol bureau. Right now, they've seen an 11% reduction in law enforcement for the Patrol Bureau as a whole. This also impacts our non-sworns in the Patrol Bureau, and they're showing a 15% reduction in staffing. And then not to be outdone, the Investigations Bureau, who of course investigates all the crimes, they're seeing a 12% reduction in staff for law enforcement. and a 9% reduction in non-sworn staff. And this just keeps going through each bureau. Of course, the bureau that we would use to train our police officers, they're showing a 28% reduction in staffing, which would be the PDRB, which has the police academy in it. The chief's office is also seeing reductions, 9% in law enforcement, and they're down 25% in their non-sworn staffing.
I want to make sure I understand the difference between non-sworn and rank and file. Rank and file means sworn officers, right?
Correct.
And to what level? From police officer to what?
All levels, from the chief down to officer, would be our law enforcement ranks.
It depends on what context you're using it.
Oh, okay.
If there's a context with labor, rank and file is sergeant and below.
Okay.
If we're using it as rank and file as members of the department, it could be anybody. But specifically in the term in labor, it would be sergeant and below.
Okay. So when I look at the labor contact track, that's what I'm.
Correct. Correct.
But what you're talking about are non-sworn. Those are the civilians that work for the
Yes.
department. Okay. Thank you.
Executive Services Bureau, which of course has the fiscal division in it. The fiscal division, they don't have a lot of law enforcement staff. They've only seen an 8% reduction, but the majority of that bureau is all non-sworn, and they're showing a 13% reduction in staffing. And then the Administrations Bureau, which houses our crime lab, has a 23% reduction in law enforcement and a 15% reduction in non-sworn staff. The crime lab currently has 12 positions open. We are hiring, though, for crime lab positions, but we are experiencing, as other departments and corporations around the country are experiencing, we're not getting applicants. And it's difficult to get especially specialized positions in the crime lab hired. We're seeing this across all positions, especially non-sworn positions with KCPD, is a lack of applicants. So my next topic is academy class. We are looking at beginning an academy class in September using funding from salary savings. That class right now is 30 individuals plus 6 from outside agencies. We have a really good diverse makeup of candidates. We have 8 current department members that are going to be in that class, and the rest of the class is their demographic breakup is 6 black males, 1 black female, 4 Hispanic males, 2 Asian males, and 8 white females, and then the other 9 are white males. We're working towards finalizing that class, getting that reported to the state of Missouri. We're going to start a class. We're hopeful by September 13th we can get that going, and maybe, depending upon maybe some other funding mechanisms, adding some extras in there. But for now, we're at 30 plus 6 from the outside.
What's a typical class size?
We can usually handle about 50, but at this time, the budget would only sustain 30. And of course, that's only because all these other positions that I just spoke about are not being filled. We're not having to pay those salaries.
So it's a salary savings.
Correct. And that concludes my report.
Alrighty. So we're going to business items. Executive Services Bureau.
Yes, thank you, Commissioners. I just want to take a minute to really thank my fiscal division staff for all their hard work all throughout the year to have a clean audit. They work very hard on all of their financial statements, make sure all the T's are dotted, or I's are dotted and T's are crossed. And it really is a big deal that they had a clean audit, that there were no deficiencies. That's huge for a governmental entity, so I'm really proud of them.
I was kind of comparing this audit to my charter school audit, which is a nightmare. And so when I read through this, I was very impressed.
Yes, so they just want to thank them. They do a great job.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I say a compliment to you? You may not expect from us.
Yes.
I had a conversation with the city auditor of Kansas City, and under Chapter 84, the auditor still has certain authority here. He noted that you are among the best departments to work with, including all the city hall divisions. So wanted to make sure you knew that. That's a compliment to your folks. He finds nothing but problems, so I do commend that.
Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
My items are located under tab B. The first item is budget transfers, and I'm requesting approval to transfer $42,500 from personal services to contractual services within the general fund, and within the police grants fund 239, transfer $651,145 from capital outlay in the amounts of $602,329 to personal services and $48,816 to commodities. And the above transfers involve grants, which means the attached revenue and expenditure accounts also require adjustment, and I recommend approval.
Move approval.
Second.
Been moved and second. All in favor by saying of aye.
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 All opposed by no. Ayes have it.
Thank you. The second item is the Niche annual maintenance renewal. Niche is our records management system, and it was first approved by the board in September of 2015, and this is just a regular renewal of a one-year maintenance agreement. And I recommend approval. It's $397,229.59 per year.
I move approval.
Second.
You've heard the motion. All in favor by saying of aye.
Aye.
All opposed by no. Ayes have it.
Thank you. Item number 3 is proposed fee schedule for fiscal year 2021-22. The fiscal division reviewed the department's current fees and proposed new ones based on calculations that adhere to Article 10, Section 22 of the Missouri Constitution and the Missouri Revised State Statutes. The majority of fees are remaining the same. Those that were revised were primarily due to changes in salary benefits of members providing the service or changes in cost of materials. The proposed fee schedule is found in Annex A of this item, and detailed fee calculations and descriptions of all fees are found in Annex B, and I recommend approval.
We received an amended page for this.
You did, correct. There was one line that had accidentally been there from a previous year, so you should have the corrected ones.
Question. So, because to me, this just looks like we're reducing slightly off-duty pay for folks and any number of other things. There's a state law change that has required that?
No, we are required to review these yearly, all of these fees, and then post them.
So why the changes of a few dollars an hour on all the different things? Is it because of a drop in demand, or what's?
More than likely, it was a change in the salary and benefits of the people that are performing that position.
So
that
I'm
function.
still missing. So for example, right, we say an officer, it's gone from $60 per hour to $56 per hour, unless I'm reading it the wrong direction. And that tends to be a negative direction, I would think. Nobody hires me to do off-duty. But, so what in the world has changed to suggest that that reduction is necessary?
And Mayor, which page are you on?
Let me go to I take notes. And maybe I've read it wrong and it's going the other direction, but,
No, it's going that direction, Mr. Mayor.
okay. What,
Go ahead. I have Major McCollum here, who was the one who drafted this memo, and he does have an answer for those questions. I will turn it over to him.
Well, is this on? The reason there's a reduction is because there's a decrease in staffing in that. So when you add up all of those positions and then you divide it, that's how you come up with the reduction in the fee that we charge. It's just based on the number of folks that we have in that element.
Let me interrupt a second, because I think what you're asking is why would we reduce it? Why don't we just take in more money? We're required to only charge what is a fair and accurate charge for what they're doing. And so they have to each year make sure that what it costs to do that report is charged and no more. So there may be people that want a DNA test and will pay a whole lot more for it, but we're not allowed to charge that. All
Right.
we can do is a fair assessment of the time and the effort.
So I hear you, and I wouldn't pick the fight over fees and sorts of things. We don't want to disadvantage the public in getting a DNA test or a police report or anything. I do have slight concern with officer time, because I see a difference in I guess, the record management fees, for example, than I do for hiring officers to work on a funeral procession or a parade or escort fees. And I guess they're thrown into the same bucket because of, and I'm just not very smart, you know better than me, but would it be because there are fewer officers performing the service, and so we're calculating that the expense of an officer's time is of somewhat lesser cost at this point?
We take it based off of their salaries, their benefits, and so the larger the pool, like for the traffic escorts, we have a larger pool than we would have for like record management. And then we divide that by their salary and benefits based on the total number combined. So that's why you see a fluctuation. If we have a reduction in staffing levels, then you're going to see that go down. But if we have an increase in staffing or a raise, then you will see those numbers go up.
Mayor, if I may, I don't know if we're talking on the same sheet here, so let me, are you asking like off-duty employment numbers, or are you asking just based on fee schedules?
I'm sorry, I'm on fee schedule, and maybe it's not off-duty, I'm being too casual. On police processions, parades, and escort fees for private organizations.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure, because some of that hires off-duty, which is a totally different scale, yeah.
Okay. And so on this one, would this just be then, this doesn't really relate to officer pay at all, this would be the reimbursement that we're getting for example, assigning a sergeant to a parade?
Versus the salary, correct?
It would, yes. Yes, that is how much, when somebody asks how much it would be for their parade, and based off of the staffing calculations, we would say it would be X number of dollars based off of these fees that we already have calculated, so that we can give them the best guess of what they're going to be looking at.
So if someone were to pull a permit, for say, and the city asked us for staffing levels to cover that event, this is the fee schedule they would get from these numbers.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Moving to second, all in favor by sign of aye.
Aye.
All opposed by no. Ayes have it.
Thank you. Item number 4 is the acceptance of the Midwest HIDA Investigative Support Center MOU. The Kansas Bureau of Investigation submitted an MOU to us for the Investigative Support Center Award in the amount of $429,026. The program is directed at reducing the manufacture, sale, and use of illegal drugs. This award is 100% federally funded, and I recommend approval.
Before we approve that, I made a note that I'd like to see a report of who or how many officers are funded through this, and a report, a progress report. And other than that, I'm good for the approval of it.
Do you want to approve it today and ask her for the report?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Heard the motion? All in favor by sign of aye.
Aye.
All opposed by no. Ayes have it.
Can I just add on that? That might be a closed board item.
Absolutely.
For next month, just for the expectation
Yeah, I made note
that
of
will
that.
go into some operational things.
Item number 5 is the bank pledge agreement form. These are administrative forms, and they're required due to the changes in personnel within the Board of Police Commissioners and the Fiscal Division. So they are just they're signature cards.
Is that what this thing is up here? I got a whole stack of stuff.
Yes.
All right. I'll take care of that afterwards.
So does it need approval?
It does.
I move approval.
Second.
Heard the motion? All in favor by sign of aye.
Aye.
All opposed by no. Ayes have it.
The next item, item number 6, this is also a board resolution with signature cards and their administrative forms that require updating due to the recent personnel changes. And I recommend approval.
I move approval.
Second. All in favor by saying aye? Aye. All opposed by no? Ayes have it.
Thank you. Item number 7 is the Street Smart software. The department was awarded through Operations Legend Grant with this Street Smart software. So this software, if you remember last year, you approved for KCK. This was part of the grant submission, would be this Street Smart software. Part of the money will be going to KCK for their Street Smart software, and then this is our part so that we can work together and share intelligence information. So the part of this for us, it's $275,000 through the Operation Legend Grant funds, and its purchase is through a cooperative procurement agreement, and we did get approval from the Department of Justice for this purchase, so I recommend approval.
So Chief Oakman's already asking for money back from.
Yes.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Heard the motion? All in favor by?
Is there any I mean, can you tell us what basically this does and how, is it working and is it worth it?
No,
Well, we don't know if it's where we haven't got it yet. So we were supposed to get it last year, and there was some Department of Justice hang up. I think COVID played a role in it. We should have been rolling this out a year ago, and we're behind. The idea is it's a software program for computers in the car, and someday may go to this kind of computer. But it is real-time intelligence information to help officers patrol. And so it will give bulletins, it will give information, hey, we've had 3 armed robberies in this area. We want to let all the officers know instantly. So things will pull up on their computer in the car that will give them indications of what's going on in the city in real time. So one of the things when we went to Tampa and we talked to them with the Public Safety Partnership again, this is one of the programs that they emphasize that we should get.
Interesting you say that, because I was on my way home one night and I saw all the commotion around Brush Creek, and I happened to stop at a Quick Trip, and I asked one of the officers if he knew the outcomes, and he was like, I have no clue what you're talking about. So that is necessary, that officers would know what's going on. Plus, this is paid for with grant money, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right.
Use it.
All in favor by sign of aye?
Aye.
All opposed by no? Ayes have it.
Thank you. And then just the last thing I have is my communications unit update. Kind of sad to say that we are currently at a staffing of 95. We're down 11 people, and we don't currently have any applicants. Like Deputy Chief Hicks was saying, just getting applicants, it's really hard right now. But his staff works really hard with going out and recruiting and getting applicants for us. But
That breaks my heart. Those people work so hard.
they do.
And, I mean, they're the ones that answer the 911 calls and dispatch the officers. If we don't have people in that unit, we can't run the department.
Correct.
Well,
It's not only the department, we can't get the community's call for help.
Yes.
I mean, there's huge ramifications here.
It's terrible.
I know Mike talked about the national trend, but, you know, we had long discussions about what we can do to try different ideas to recruit people, but the premise or the stage that we're in, that we have not had an applicant, is one of uncharted territories for this department in my 35-year career. I have never experienced that. And obviously, as the economy rolls, we've seen periods where we've had thousands of applicants, you know, almost for jobs, to, you know, when economy's rolling really well, to, you know, a handful. But we've always had applicants. To hit the stage where we have 0 applicants is very scary for all of us.
Well, and as you remember, we instituted a new hourly, 10-4. 10 hours a day, 4 days a week, which supposedly made a big difference. At least when I went and visited with every one of the people that sat on those desks, they said, yes, it makes a big difference. But now we've lost that many applicants. I'm so sorry. Thank you for telling us, Karen. Keep us advised.
I will. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. All right. Professional Development Bureau.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
I'll start out by, I think he left already, but thanking Dr. Scott for coming in, taking the time to do that. My information's under tab C. We've got 6 policies to go through. I will start out with the first one is eyewitness identification procedures. This is one we spoke about last month. Commissioner Tolbert, you wanted us to amend it, and we did that amendment, removing the numerical scale. And if there are no other issues, I would ask for approval.
Well, you got most of it. It's kind of like a doctor going in and doing surgery. Let's see, what page? I think it's on page 16.
A3 probably?
Yes, under N.
Yep.
It still says the victim shall use their own words, and it has, and not a numerical scale.
That's for the administrator that's just giving instructions to the administrator, the person that's showing the pictures. We want them, that's just telling them, please just ask them to put it in their own words.
Got you.
Don't say, give me a scale of 1 to 10. That's what that is.
But it doesn't preclude the witness from using.
Correct.
All right.
And if the witness gives it a number scale, because that is their own words, it's to be written down verbatim. I would ask for approval.
I'm good with that.
No other questions.
Good.
Second.
Oh, I move approval.
All right. And it's already been seconded.
Oh.
All in favor by sign of aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Ayes have it.
I'm a little late.
The next one is recovered property procedures. This is a compilation of several current directives, and it's paired with the property and evidence packaging manual. It's pretty in-depth, but I would ask for approval if
Yes,
no
it
questions.
was.
It's a lot of stuff put together, but it really cleans it up for the officers.
Okay.
I have no comments on it. I'd move approval unless someone else wants to talk.
I'll second.
All in favor by sign of aye.
Aye.
All opposed by no. Ayes have it.
The next one is Code of Ethics and Rules of Conduct. Just a few minor changes. One, because of a change in the Senate bill and under Chapter 84, and one has to deal with being paid for catching deserters, and they don't pay for those anymore anyway. We can't accept it, but we just made those slight changes. If there are no questions, I'd ask for approval.
I move approval.
Second.
All in favor by sign of aye.
Aye.
All opposed by no. Ayes have it. Approved.
Next one is patrol procedures. Again, dealing mainly with instructing officers to turn on their digital equipment and a couple other minor deals dealing with domestic violence. If no questions, I'd ask for approval of that one.
I'm looking for some more teeth in not turning on this equipment. And I didn't see it. I don't have any suggestions. Normally, when I see a problem, I try to come up with a suggestion how to fix it, but that troubled me, that there is not a little more substantial, and I don't want to call it discipline, but there's got to be some consequence, something, because we don't want to leave ourselves open to where there are too many incidents of, oh, I forgot to turn my equipment on, or.
Well, I would just try to say it this way. Policy really can't get into threatening discipline, or generally doesn't. It's implied that it's there if you don't follow the policy. So we've told them through policy when you're expected and when you're mandated to turn it on, turn it off, when you can and can't, and all that. And then it's up to, I guess, like standard operating procedures and some kind of norm that'll be covered in a disciplinary policy to get that consistency there.
And I think some of that's referenced in body-worn camera policy, which is a separate policy
Yes.
from
It
this,
gets-
which
it does get-
addresses that specifically.
Okay.
Not necessarily the discipline that as you mentioned, but more specific of when and why and when you can turn it off and stuff. It's covered there.
'Cause we want them to have those on.
Yes.
All right.
And you all, just for reference, you all approved that policy, and we had that discussion at the time. So I believe we actually made some modifications before we put that policy out because the board wanted some language. So I'd be happy to give that to you again if you want to see it, but I rest assured that the message has been sent that the equipment is to be on under these circumstances.
Pleasure of the board.
Move approval.
Oh, I'm sorry. Second.
All in favor by sign of aye?
Aye.
All opposed by no? Ayes have it.
The next one is the uniform and personal appearance regulations. Fairly minor changes throughout, and if there are no questions, I would ask for approval.
Move approval.
Let me just ask briefly, so it's primarily, we've gone to gender-neutral language, among other things. I don't want to get too in-depth, but does this include facial hair? Is there any implication on some of those items at all in this policy?
Well, some of that is still covered in here.
Okay.
Yes.
I want to actually talk about this further relating to litigation. So is there a way that I could get this moved to the closed session agenda?
Sure.
That'll just be the request.
Yeah, and I read it closely, and I thought it sounded pretty fair, but I think we can still talk about it closed.
Thank you.
So we'll hold it then? All right.
And the last one is the residency requirements. This is getting us in compliance with the Officer Bill of Rights coming out next month. And I will answer any questions, or if there are none, I move for approval.
I'm not even going to waste your time. I'm just opposed. I can give lots of reasons, but I think, and I've sent to the board, I understand that typically any recommendations will then go to research and development where we can work through. I think the distinction that I would argue is, and I understood it as well, that the state legislature was contemplating officers being residents of Missouri within 30 miles of the police headquarters. I did not read the legislation, and I think there were a number of state senators didn't necessarily think the legislation included Kansas areas as well. And so I would remain opposed to that. I don't think the legislation compels us to do so. And I don't necessarily think that it's essential for different recruiting or other items. So I would actually just be opposed to that. I do think that there are other inducements we can have to getting officers to live in Kansas City, Missouri, particularly in historically disadvantaged areas, areas that have had high crime. I think a discussion we've had several times today are building community connections are one of our goals. So that's why I have one resolution for you all's review and your review relating to the types of incentives we can craft, either property tax abatements, other such things that help entice officers to live within the city, particularly within areas of the city. That's not germane necessarily to what you're discussing, but I would be opposed to including Kansas side counties into this item. I guess I'd be opposed to the policy issue.
We met and discussed this, and this was an add-on from Lodge 99 and their interpretation of how it was written, and that's why we added it, the way we added it. Certainly open to discussion, and, I mean, we have to get it to a level that you as a board approve it, so we look to you guys.
I wonder what happens in case of a tie, because right now there are only 4 voting members, and I had planned to resonate my disapproval to be the lone no, and I thought it would pass with the other 3 votes. So,
Case of a tie, I believe.
Interesting.
It fails. Right.
Well, when do we have to make this decision? When does the statute go into effect?
August 28th, I believe.
Our
But
next
the
board
officers
meeting.
would still be able to follow the law. I mean, we're not going to hold officers to law. This is our policy. So we meet the 31st. Certainly, we can have 3 days to ponder the policy if that's what you would like to do.
What I'd like, and maybe you already know this and you can tell me today, do we have any objective evidence to say that it would be helpful to the department to have officers who would then be allowed to live in Wyandotte and Johnson counties? I mean, because you all know, I want everybody to live in Kansas City, Missouri, period. So I've made that clear. I'm not going to go down that road again. But is there some objective evidence that suggests that would be helpful to the
I
department?
will answer it this way, and if the chief wants to change it, he obviously can. I don't know that we have objective evidence of that, but I think we can make a pretty strong inference that that's the case. And
Why?
that's the best I can, just knowing the different departments and the folks that, through my career, that the sole reason they haven't come over here is because they wanted to stay on the Kansas side, whether it be for school districts or taxes, whatever. I know personally of several people that probably would, at some point in their career, have made that lateral transfer, and what hindered them from doing that was having to move to Kansas City, Missouri, or move to the Missouri side. Even if they could have lived in Smithfield, they would have still said no because they want to stay in Kansas. That's it. Again, it's an inference on my behalf. It's not objective.
Is there any way for us to find out, for instance, if we can get more communications employees if they're allowed to live in Wyandotte County or Johnson County?
I don't know how we do that unless we opened it up for a year and then see what the results were. But I mean, we can go back and look at applications. The problem is when we do it in the past, we hand them the next sheet of paper that said you had to move here within X amount of months. So even if they came from there, then they had to move there. I don't know what other indication there would be other than, I'm sure all of us on the department know somebody that works at another neighboring agency that said, I'd always consider Kansas City, but I wanted to live in Stillwell next to my parents or whatever. We all have, as Mike said, those kinds of stories. Now, whether they would have really applied, I don't know.
Well, some of my best friends live in Kansas. I don't think this state line makes that much of a difference. And, if you're going to, I was always for Kansas City, Missouri residency requirement also, but that's not the case anymore. And it just seems like you're hurting yourself if you don't include Johnson and Wyandotte County, and especially Wyandotte County is, we have a lot of trouble getting minority recruits.
So that Lodge 99 raised that, Commissioner Wagner saying that Wyandotte County is the most diverse county in the region. So, that was some of the discussion. They also said, that schools are strong in some of the Johnson County public school systems and that we are not recruiting from there either. Do we want to? That was the discussion we had during executive committee.
So we could, what they're saying is we could go to the Johnson County schools and recruit people to come and be our officers.
Sure, like right now for communications, we can take 18-year-olds into communications if they're not going to go to college or they're going to community college and they would like to have, an evening job or PM shift, which we can offer. Those are opportunities that we think. Now, we try here, as you know, we had a program with Kansas City, Missouri School District to do the exact same thing, but we're not seeing very many applicants from it.
I'll just hop in. And by the way, Deputy Chief Wood is a straight shooter, and I appreciate it. I think anecdotally, yeah, that's just how things are. People want more freedom generally. So that then leads us back to why do we have residency requirements, all these other things. A few things that color my thinking. One, there was a city council resolution where 12 of the 13 members voted to support the retention of residency requirements. And so I do think, as the one person who comes from across the street, I'm going to stay consistent with that position. Several of our state senators, including several of our state senators who ultimately voted for the bill that is the source of all of this, voted on it with the viewpoint that this would be still Missouri resident officers with the Kansas City Police Department. They did not vote on a bill that was just abolition of the residency requirement, because if we were going to do that, then why even have a 30-mile limit? I mean, if we're just doing kind of where is anybody, why not add Douglas County, Kansas, Shawnee County, Kansas, which picks up more diverse applicants, et cetera. If we were looking for a compromise, which I'm not sure respectfully my friends in the lodge are, then I'd be willing to talk about just having Wyandotte County. I think if we did that, they would be very unhappy and say, no, this is actually a bill about Johnson County, Kansas, because for anecdotal reasons too, because I'm going to be a straight shooter. There's a view the schools are good, all those sorts of things. But I would say this, right? Kansas City, Missouri has 14 public school districts, outstanding districts. You can live in different places. You can have horses. You can live in a high rise. You can do all these sorts of things. I think the state legislature went through extensive discussion, and at least all of us thought until now that it still limited items to folks living on the Missouri side of the metro. I don't know why we necessarily need to expand beyond that, particularly when we have had generations of this requirement. I think we have a very good department with a bunch of people who live in Kansas City, Missouri now. The legislature has made a decision, in my view, that said, let's expand it to, in essence, the Missouri suburbs. But I don't know why we would look to make these additional expansions. What's more, if our recruiting goal relates to not just numbers, but also diverse officers, all those sorts of things, no one can really, in my view, make a case right now how opening up necessarily Johnson County, for example, actually adds to that. And so I would suggest that we either amend what's before us now and just approve the Missouri side requirement as I believe is required by state law, and then perhaps we all have a longer discussion on the benefits of the state of Kansas at some other point.
That'd be fine with me. And the 30-mile thing, I really think about how much time it takes you, but 30 miles would probably be 30 minutes. But I want people to be able to respond quickly, and I don't want somebody off in Shawnee County or Douglas County having to get to Kansas City in order to respond. But,
Well, if I could, I'll make the suggestion that we take that one sentence out about Kansas and ask for approval without that. That gives us the opportunity to have that approved and still gives us time to discuss by the 31st or the 28th. And even that is a 3-day window. We can fade that kind of heat, so to speak. But approve it for the Missouri recommendation, and that gives us the month to revisit the Kansas stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're being fair, and it breaks my heart, there may be some people who want to make plans in life, and some may want to see that once this is free, they can buy farmland in Smithville or wherever else. And so, right, I think it would be fair probably to amend today to come to the Missouri answer, which will be our answer going forward. And then in the event y'all want to bring back the Kansas thing, then I guess we could have further discussion. My answer will still probably be the same, unless we come up with a Wyandotte exclusive remedy. But I think that's a fair solution for us.
I move approval with the amendment that the mayor has stated.
Second.
Heard the motion, or the amended motion. All in favor by sign of aye?
Aye.
All opposed by no. Aye. Ayes have it.
And my last thing is I have about a 45-minute presentation. That's all I got.
All right. Office of General Counsel. Afternoon.
Good afternoon. My items are behind tab G. The first item is a summary, a June summary of the private officer licensing unit. Do you have any questions over that? And then the next two items are appeals. The first one is an appeal from Mr. Repress, and it was a denial of an unarmed private security license. And so this is before you.
I was reading through Mr. Repress's appeal, and he had some impressive support letters. And I don't know what the pleasure of the rest of the board is, but I'm inclined to grant him that license on appeal.
I was not inclined to. I'll have to think about it.
I'll defer to the chair and agree. So I'd give you a second if you.
All right. All in favor by sign of aye?
What's the motion?
Are you?
I made the motion, you seconded it. And so.
To grant
To
the appeal.
grant the appeal.
All right.
All in favor by sign of aye?
Aye.
All opposed by no? Ayes have it, so we will grant that appeal for Mr. Repress.
The next appeal is behind the following pink sheet, and that is an appeal by Ms. Coulter, and it also was a denial of an unarmed private security license.
I am led to agree with the opinion to.
Denial.
To deny.
Deny.
Yeah.
Second the motion.
All in favor by sign of aye?
Aye.
All opposed by no? Ayes have it.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Office of Community Complaints.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. The
Afternoon.
Office of Community Complaints has provided to you in advance copies of its monthly reports for June 2021 and the January 2021 to June 2021 semi-annual statistical reports, which are located under tab H of your electronic devices and/or board book. At this time, I will provide you with the most significant highlights of OCC's activities. For the first 2 quarters of 2021, the office received a total of 102 complaints, which represents a 16% decrease compared to the first half of calendar year 2020. For the first half of 2021, OCC submitted for formal investigation 54 complaints received to the Internal Affairs Unit. These 54 complaints reflect a 33.4% decrease compared to the first half of calendar year 2021. Additionally, during the first half of 2021, the Board of Police Commissioners and the Chief of Police reviewed and concurred on 49 recommendations rendered by OCC and fully investigated by the Internal Affairs Unit. The concurrences by the Board and Chief were on 12 not sustained recommendations, 9 exonerations, and 10 sustained recommendations. The Internal Affairs investigation of 18 other complaints during this reporting period were terminated either for non-cooperation by the complainants or closed by the OCC or voluntary withdrawal by the complainants. At this point, that ends my statistical report. Are there any questions?
Yes, sir.
I don't have a question, but I have a request. I know that Internal Affairs does the investigations for us, and they are calling people that have had a bad experience. They wouldn't make a complaint if they didn't. Is it possible to have the Internal Affairs people not call and say, hello, this is Police Officer Jones? Because that immediately makes them think of a police officer's calling me. And of course, they're not really thinking about a police officer calling them when you answer to us, not to the department. Is there a way to train those people or direct them or something so that when they call, they say, hi, this is Kathy Dean. I've been asked to investigate your complaint. And somewhere along the line, they can explain who they are and what they do. But you see, I'm just trying to make it a little easier for the people who receive a call that they're not expecting, probably on a phone number that they're not expecting. Can you talk to them or work with them on that?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
I think that can be an easy fix. So I will talk with the commander in Internal Affairs, and I'll get back to you.
Great.
On what the resolution will be.
Thank you.
All right. I also want to give you just some staff updates for the Office of Community Complaints. Speaking for myself, I was recently reappointed to the Centurion's Leadership Development Program Alumni Board. I'll be serving on the Civics Committee, so that'll give us some increased opportunities for dialogue with some of the Chamber of Commerce members and some of my fellow Centurion alumni. I've also been asked to be a panelist facilitator for the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement during its virtual conference that's going to take place on August 16th through August the 7th. My particular panel will be entitled Maintaining Enthusiasm for Oversight in the Face of Resistance and Setbacks, and it will occur on Monday, August the 30th from 2 o'clock p.m. to 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Also, the OCC began partnering with the Kansas City Human Rights Commission to develop ongoing forums and speaker series around current issues facing criminal justice and other social and societal concerns. And also, during the first half of the year, we have conducted trainings, both at the Supervisors School at the Regional Police Academy, involving newly appointed sergeants and civilian members concerning internal and external conflict de-escalation and resolution. We also have some pending trainings coming up with the KCPD Communications Unit and the Human Relations Department of the City of Kansas City. Senior Legal Analyst Karen Williams continues to work as a liaison to NACOL during the planning, development, and execution of the scheduled virtual and in-person conference with that organization, as well as ongoing panel discussion and webinar series that has been launched as a means of support and informational mechanisms for civilian oversight practitioners worldwide. And lastly, just want to share this bit of information with you. Please bear with me. On July 3rd, 1971, Michael L. Walker was sworn in as a new recruit entering the police academy for the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. I just want to make a note, because he's listening, I was not yet born. He completed 30 years with the department and retired on a Friday, subsequently reported the following Monday to begin a 9-month assignment as a civilian employee with the Private Officers Licensing Section. Upon completion of that assignment, he was subsequently hired as a legal analyst with the Board of Police Commissioners Office of Citizen Complaints, now Community Complaints. As of July 3rd, 2021, Michael L. Walker has given 50 years of service to the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department and the Board of Police Commissioners, both as sworn law enforcement and as a civilian. Senior Legal Analyst Walker is a computer savant, and I do believe that he has the distinction of being the first member of the department to own a purse computer, according to some newsletter that I saw that was published long ago. He makes sure that the office is manned even during inclement weather. He is a video game aficionado, and we've had some very interesting conversations about Xbox strategies, new advances in technologies, and the like. Mike is literally a lunch pail guy. He eats lunch at his desk every day, which affords me and the staff to go out and meet with community members and to attend meetings and do all of those things. And Mike always tells me when I leave, he says, "Don't worry, I got it. I'll see you when you get back." And he also has this uncanny statement that he makes every time I say, "Mike, I'm headed to the board meeting," and he always says, "Better you than me." As Senior Legal Analyst Walker's tenure is coming to an end, I just wanted to take this moment to salute and honor his service, not as the executive director for the office, but as his colleague and his friend. So I just wanted to say congratulations to Mike and his family on those 50-plus years of service. Thank you very much. That concludes my report. Are there any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, 50 years. Public comments, and I'm going to ask those who are called, if you will look at the clock. We have 2 minutes, and we're going to ask you to please hold your comments within 2 minutes, and at the end of 2 minutes, that mic will go off, and so please try to keep your comments within 2 minutes. Latrice Annette, is it Mondin? Mondin? Thank you.
Thank you so much for allowing me to speak. I will be brief. I was going to ask for something, but I think my question was already answered with everything that was said today. I'm actually on the diversity committee of the League of Women Voters, and so I came to ask a question to see if we could be able to resolve something or get something done about this. I'm coming as a citizen. Now, bear with me. I am a Chicago native, so I heard you guys talking about us. I heard you, and you do well. You do things well here, and so, but my maternal state, my grandmother's state, Missouri, and I said Missouri because she's from Poplarcliff, Missouri, where she was, and I have family here. So I've only been here, minus COVID, 3 years. So I'm a newbie here, and I'm officially a Missouri resident as of last year when I got my ID. So I live in the 18th and Vine District, and it's amazing because the mayor is my neighbor, and that's really cool. But also, we've been having some struggles over at my building that is like right up under the juke house. And so like we have a lot of activity where people break into cars. I actually got rid of my car because it was so many break-ins. And I'm from Chicago, so I know how to walk and book it. But you guys don't have a lot of sidewalks, so that makes it a little difficult here. Yeah, we've been having a lot of issues. I talked to the wonderful police officers that are on 18th and Vine. I know all of them by face, they know me. They sometimes walk me home, but that's outside of their little area that they have there that they're supposed to patrol. So they're really doing me an extra favor when they see me walking, and it's late, and my boyfriend's not there, to walk me, and they walk me down, a certain amount of time. Now, I am only 115, but I'm from Chicago, and I'm feisty. So I know how to handle myself. However, it would be nice if, I don't know, somehow it could be expanded, that space that you guys guard. But I know you have short staff issues, so that's what I had to ask.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Robert Brown. Had to leave. All right. Ms. Cheryl Ferguson.
Y'all all right? I know you're gonna take it from my time, but I encourage everybody, we've been here for a long time, just stand and stretch. Just stand and stretch real quick. I'm gonna be nice. I'm gonna be nice, because y'all have been beat up enough today. Y'all all right? Y'all all right? So the mayor retweeted a part of a 3-part post from the governor. The governor was stating that education should be under local control. The mayor asked if that could apply to police too. I clickbaited and saw that the governor's whole post was not surprised, but got infuriated because he was basically letting it be known how against critical race theory he is. Now, this is not about critical race theory, but more so critical thought. And I think that's something that we really have to dive into. I was actually very appreciative, Chief, of you reaching out to me this morning to make sure that Jake, who lied to me and told me he would be in a police uniform today, and he is not, but that follow-up, I would also like to invite Deputy Chief Mabin, since you're a very statistical person, because I will not be coming alone either. We will be talking about numbers. The policescorecard.org, 13,147 overall police departments were analyzed, 526 of them here in Missouri. And the reproach that you guys gave was that, well, they didn't get the data correct. They didn't analyze it correctly. And my problem with that is that they had no reason to look at Kansas City specifically in a specific light. They just looked at data, the same as you heard from Gene today, just raw data. So if we can get off of our emotions and look at the data and have real conversations, I'd like to just really get to that point. Because too often, what I'm seeing happen within this department is that everything that can be done is, but things that should be done are not. Yes, you can do this, but you're creating a bigger divide with the community that you're expecting to trust and believe you. I'm not surprised you're not getting applicants. You're creating divides. Fix it.
Thank you. Ron Hunt. I think Ron had to leave. And our last public comment is that Caritha or Dillard? And please tell me the correct pronunciation of your name.
Artisha.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi. Thank you, Commissioners, for the opportunity to say a few words today about the ongoing gun violence problem in our city. My name is Cartisha Dillard, and I am a Kansas City resident. I'm also a 2-time survivor of gun violence. I lost my youngest brother of gun violence in 2014, and my oldest son was shot and killed in a road rage incident in 2017. I personally know the pain and the long-term mental and emotional effects that gun violence does to a family and its community as a whole. That's why this issue is very close to my heart. Gun violence has plagued our community for many years, and throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, homicides have sharply increased further. We have a serious crisis on our hands. And as of July 1st, Kansas City has recorded 75 homicides, which have continued to climb higher, and a majority involve firearms. This disproportionately burdens Black residents. Over 75% of homicide victims were Black, but less than 30% of Kansas City's population is Black. Last month, Mayor Lucas recommended to the board a number of ways to prioritize gun violence at commissions meetings, and I wholeheartedly support these recommendations. We need the commission to take gun violence seriously by providing the public with updates on the public department's plan to implement strategic solutions for violence reduction. We need transparency on what gun violence data is telling us and how our law enforcement is responding to this data. We also need better cooperation and coordination with the community and victims, as well as groups that work every day to prevent future violence. We deserve concerted focus and efforts on the gun violence crisis in our city, and that starts with you. I ask you prioritize this issue as Mayor Lucas has called for, and make this a key discussion item for all board meetings. Thank you so much for your time as we work together to resolve tragic issues of gun violence in our city. Thank you.
Thank you, and we are sorry for your pain that you have experienced from gun violence. And I think that with our meeting today and all of the presentations, this board is serious about partnering with the community to not only curb gun violence, but eradicate it at some point. Chief Smith, general discussion.
Well, good afternoon. First, I'd like to thank Jamie for her service. As she tried to get her to stay for the next board meeting, she just said no. So I don't know what that's all about, but I do appreciate, we have long talks about all things legal, and her advice and her service is very much appreciated. So I had a chart created, as we've talked today, through public safety partnership, our risk terrain modeling, and the initiatives. Frequently we get asked, what is the department doing to address violent crime? And many of these things we've brought up before, prior, in bits and pieces. Today we tried to give an overview of the initiatives that we're working on and how we think those are working. Obviously, you saw some of the stats, and those are hard to say. I think Jonas was up from Rutgers, who say statistically significant based on these actions, which is always nice to have that academic reinforcement to say that this program is working. Not so much on the public safety partnership side. We don't have that academic partner with shoot review or other things at this time. Wouldn't be a bad addition to the process if we could get there at some point. But as we talk about this and we talk about the violence, what I wanted to give the board was a quick peek at the current stats, because everything we give you is about 2 months behind. So what we have here is a period of time. So we have in the second column would be the last month, and then the first column is the month before that, so you'd have an idea how to compare. But this is much more real-time figures of what we're doing, and we took these stats from what we do at our weekly crime meeting. These stats are reported on by every division commander every week as we go around the room and talk about the issues the divisions are having, and we can look at where our trends are moving positively and negatively, and what can we do to try and work on those patterns. Mostly the one-hit wonders were not harder to work on. Locations, environments, things like that we can work on, but the one-hit wonders of some crimes, they are much harder to tackle. So we try to focus on things where we have pattern crimes, like Major Young reported on our entertainment districts, and how we can make a look at that problem, how we can diagnose it, and then make a solution, which in this case was enforcement. So I just wanted to give the board a quick preview of what we're looking at currently as the trends as of 7/25. Last weekend, you can see where we're at, where we went from murder, non-fatal shootings are up there, which again goes to our gun crimes. Our aggravated assaults overall, our gun crimes are just a part of those. So those are assaults that are usually used some sort of deadly weapon or can cause serious physical harm. So you can just see a little tracking that. I didn't know if that'd be helpful to the board, but as the mayor requested, he wanted some real-time discussion, not just going over stats. I think previously, even though these are stats, they're much more current and they're much more robust. They're just preliminary stats. They're not been vetted by the state or anything. This is just pulling our data. Any questions on that? Okay, and then I guess overall was when we were talking about the new format today, bless you, Commissioner, we were talking about the new format today. I was hoping to get some feedback if we headed in the right direction. Are we, the presentations were pertinent? We're bringing the right things to the board.
And I'll cover that in my comments, just to keep us moving with the format. I'll make sure I mention that in our discussion.
Okay. The other thing that we reported on was the violence reduction meetings. We've been participating in that with the mayor and the governing board, which was the old NOVA governing board. We now have some community members on there. So we work on that process over there on the I don't know how, independent kind of group that looks at violent reduction strategies. We're very new in this process. I think there's been a lot of discussion. We reported on crime trends, but I just wanted to update the board. We are involved in that and continue to be involved. That's all I have.
All right, thank you, Chief. Need approval of open session meetings for June 15th and June 25th. Can we do them together, David?
Yes.
I move approval for both.
Second.
All in favor by sign of aye?
Aye.
All opposed by no. Ayes have it. Is this just a matter of information, board hearing?
Yeah.
Yes. I think all that's left are the comments from commissioners and the motion to go into close.
All right. Mayor Lucas?
I'll speak very briefly because it has been a long meeting. Chief, thank you. I think when anyone looks at how this meeting flowed, just the sheer volume of information we were able to share to the public, with the public, I think this is a very positive move in the right direction. I will note, although everybody did very well, I particularly enjoyed learning things from Captain Cobalt, who I've seen a number of different times, but kind of learning about the framework laid out, I think is very helpful to the board. I think it was the risk maintenance section as well was particularly interesting to learn what the department is doing. And I think hopefully a lot of folks saw that. I think these were some wonderful changes in connection with what we were able to do, and you all met the moment as well in connection with all that. So I just want to say thank you for that. And we answered so many things, we don't have a lot to complain about at the end. So I will stop there and say thank you.
Wagner?
Good meeting, thank you.
Kathy D?
I was very pleased with the order of the meeting today. Obviously, I received hundreds of emails saying that they want us to prioritize gun violence. Well, I think what we showed today, what you showed today, is we've always prioritized that. We just haven't talked about it. And so what was helpful today and will be helpful going forward is for the community to see what we're doing. And I really appreciated the reports today. Thank you.
David?
Thank you. Normally, I don't speak very much at these meetings, but frankly, I'm quite disturbed with the constant bashing that this department's been receiving from the media from the political world, including from one of the 4 prosecutors with whom we constantly deal, and some other segments of the community. The men and women of this department, despite an overwhelming amount of negativity, are incredibly hardworking, dedicated, and have accomplished an awful lot. Now, my words today represent my viewpoint, certainly, and not necessarily the views of anyone else on the board or the department. But there are a lot of people talking about the need to reduce violent crime in Kansas City and that the department should focus on this, perhaps to the exclusion of everything else. What you probably haven't seen, and we've talked about it certainly extensively today, is all the innovative strategies the department has been using over the last several years to fight crime. And we've been doing a whole lot better at it than most cities. You look at the statistics nationwide. Our statistics, frankly, are a lot better than most cities. And you can go on, you can drill down to numerous different cities. They were up dramatically much more than we were last year. This year, we are down overall. Most cities still are up overall and continue to rise. We're down in these statistics compared to even to 2019. Non-fatal shootings are down significantly from 2019 and 20. Now, there's been certainly some talk about drugs. Hard drugs such as fentanyl, heroin, methamphetamines, PCP are still a problem in America. Overdoses last year were up 30%. We cannot ignore drugs. They're a problem in this country. People are far more likely to die of an overdose from drugs than from homicide, than to be a victim of homicide. We can't ignore these problems. There has to be a bottom line, there has to be a balanced way of looking at crime. All of our criminal laws were enacted by the legislatures for the simple reason that society didn't like certain activities. The department has to address all of them. That's our job. If we completely ignore certain crimes, what's going to happen? They're going to flourish. If something shouldn't be a crime, that's the legislature's responsibility. We've addressed that with medical marijuana. The police and prosecutors don't make the laws. We simply enforce them. Another thing we can do to reduce violent crime is stop the revolving door at the county jail. The department arrests people for violent crimes, and then many of them are promptly released on bail or even on their own recognizance. And what do? They commit more crimes. We don't have adequate jail space. We're shipping many arrestees way out in the countryside right now. Others simply are just released. Don't get me wrong, I'm not blaming the judges on this either. Our jails are overcrowded, and regrettably, the courts must take steps to avoid any unconstitutional jailhouse conditions. We need adequate jail space. Again, another thing, recently people have stated that this department doesn't provide adequate statistics on crime. And this past month, the board received probably hundreds of emails requesting better statistics. It's simply false. In the 11 years I've held this position, at every board meeting, there are more statistics and data than you can shake a stick at. All you have to do is read them. If anyone who wants this data, you can ask for it. Most of it, frankly, is on the department's website at kcpd.org/crimes-statistics. Perhaps the following quotation from Mark Twain is most applicable. What gets us into trouble is not what we don't know, it's what we know for sure that ain't so. Is our department perfect? No. I don't know of any department in the country that is. Can we get better? Yes. Are we getting better? Yes. But we need to adequately fund the department. If we don't, the gains we have made will not continue, crimes will go unsolved, and wait times for 911 calls will continue to increase. We are well on our way to 1980s staffing levels, and that's not good. I want to thank you for listening to my rants, but I believe in the department and want to see it succeed. As the author Thomas Hauser noted, being a good police officer is one of the most difficult, dangerous, and idealistic jobs in the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have had a spirited meeting today, and but I think in order to come to some resolve, there has to be both sides of the coin. And so I think we've had great community and audience participation. I was even impressed to hear the citizen say that some of her questions had been answered before she came to the podium. So I think we're moving in the right direction. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, command staff. Thank you, board. And it has been moved that we go into closed session.
Second.
Second, all in favor by sign of aye?
Lucas,
Aye. Yeah, we do have to do roll call.
Dean, aye. Lucas, aye. Is that correct?
Talbot, aye. I think that's all the ayes.
Wagner, aye.
Thank you.